The HARP facility houses 180 antennas capable of transmitting up to 3.6 megawatts of power into the atmosphere. By sending focused radio waves into the ionosphere, scientists can temporarily excite charged particles, creating localized disturbances. In theory, these experiments help researchers improve satellite communication, radar accuracy, and study natural phenomena like the Northern Lights. But to the conspiracy-minded, the implications were far more sinister. If HARP could heat the ionosphere, they reasoned, it could also manipulate the jet stream, alter atmospheric pressure, and even generate storms. Over time, this theory evolved into one of the most widespread modern conspiracies, that governments, using HARP and similar technologies, have found a way to engineer the weather itself. It wasn't an entirely baseless fear. The concept of weather modification dates back decades. During the Vietnam War, the US military's Operation Popeye used cloud seeding to prolong monsoon seasons and disrupt enemy movement. The idea of weaponizing the sky was no longer science fiction. It was documented history. So when people saw HARP's massive antenna arrays glowing under the aurora, they asked, what if this was the next evolution of weather warfare? Earthquakes, hurricanes, and conspiracies. Every time a major natural disaster struck, be it a tsunami, a hurricane, or a heat wave, HARP's name resurfaced. After the 2010 Haiti earthquake, some pointed to satellite readings showing unusual ionospheric activity days before the event. Theorists claimed that HARP's transmissions had triggered tectonic instability deep beneath the Earth. In 2013, after Typhoon Haiyan devastated the Philippines, online forums buzzed with claims that HARP had been activated days earlier, allegedly testing atmospheric resonance frequencies capable of steering tropical storms. Similar allegations followed Hurricane Katrina, the Japanese earthquake of 2011, and countless other catastrophes. Scientists dismissed these theories as misunderstanding basic physics. HARP, they explained, could not possibly influence such massive natural forces. The energy it releases is minuscule compared to what nature itself produces. A single lightning bolt contains more power than HARP's maximum output. Yet conspiracy theorists counter with one point. HARP doesn't need to equal nature's power. It only needs to influence it. By introducing small disturbances at key atmospheric points, they argue, it could theoretically redirect energy already present in weather systems, amplifying or dampening natural events like a conductor guiding an orchestra. The mind control allegation. Beyond weather, another darker theory took root, that HARP could affect not just the atmosphere, but the human mind. The human brain operates on electrical signals that oscillate between 1 and 40 Hz. Some researchers believe that electromagnetic radiation at certain frequencies can influence brain activity, mood, or perception. HARP's transmissions, capable of reaching the same frequency ranges, fueled speculation that the system could broadcast subliminal signals, mass mind control on a global scale. Documents from declassified Cold War programs like MK-Ultra and Soviet psychotronic research show that governments have indeed explored electromagnetic influence on behavior. So, when HARP emerged decades later with immense power and secrecy, the dots seemed too easy to connect. According to this theory, HARP's real function was dual use, controlling both climate and consciousness. Manipulating weather could destabilize nations. Manipulating thought could pacify populations. Whether science or science fiction, it became one of the most persistent fears of the digital age. A high-tech puppet master shaping reality itself. The evidence and the silence. When pressure mounted, HARP's administrators opened the facility to the public in 2016. Tourists and journalists were invited to walk through the array, photograph it, and ask questions. The site appeared harmless, just rows of antennas and power generators. The government even transferred control to the University of Alaska Fairbanks, claiming the project was purely academic. Yet skeptics were unconvinced. "That's exactly what they do," one researcher wrote online. "Shift control, rebrand, and continue classified work elsewhere." Indeed, after the transfer, several similar research facilities began operating worldwide, in Russia, China, and Norway, all exploring ionospheric modification. Some believe HAARP simply became part of a global atmospheric network, hidden under new names and agencies. Adding to the mystery, HAARP occasionally shuts down for months or years, only to resume operations without public explanation. When it does, reports of strange atmospheric anomalies, color-shifting auroras, radio interference, unexplained hums, often surge online. Coincidence or connection? Even official statements sometimes sound unnervingly vague. When asked about potential military applications, a U.S. Air Force spokesperson once admitted that HAARP could simulate and control ionospheric conditions, but denied any weather manipulation intent. To conspiracy theorists, that single phrase, simulate and control, was the smoking gun, the power to play God. The deeper unease surrounding HAARP is philosophical, not scientific. It's the fear that humans have begun to play God, to meddle with natural systems so vast that even minor interference could spiral into catastrophe. If we can seed clouds, redirect rain, or bend the jet stream, what happens when nations weaponize those powers? Documents from the 1990s show the US military exploring weather as a force multiplier, using environmental modification for tactical advantage. Although HAARP is never named, the principle aligns disturbingly close. The concept of owning the weather by 2025 appeared in a US Air Force report, outlining a future where weather could be controlled like any other battlefield asset. Perhaps HAARP isn't a weapon in itself, but the prototype for one. A stepping stone toward technologies that could reshape climate, geopolitics, and even consciousness on command. The storm above and within. Today, HAARP continues to operate quietly, its towering antennas humming under the Alaskan sky. Officially, it's still studying the ionosphere. But for millions who followed its story, HAARP remains a symbol of scientific secrecy, proof that the line between research and control is thinner than ever. Whether or not it truly manipulates weather, HAARP reflects a more profound truth, that our species has grown powerful enough to alter the systems that sustain us, and reckless enough to try. The storm, perhaps, is not just above us, but within us. The endless conflict between curiosity and caution, progress and power. And as lightning dances over the Arctic horizon, one question still lingers in the static air. When humans learn to command the skies, who commands the humans? End of Chapter 4, approximately 1,020 words. Would you like me to move directly into Chapter 5, The Flat Earth Revival? Why some still believe the world isn't round. 1,000 words, same pacing. You said, P. ChatGPT said, perfect, continuing seamlessly, keeping the hypnotic documentary tone with precise pacing and depth. Here's Chapter 5, The Flat Earth Revival. Why some still believe the world isn't round, approximately 1,000 words. Chapter 5, The Flat Earth Revival. Why some still believe the world isn't round. For centuries, humanity has looked to the skies and seen a world that curves, spins, and drifts through the vastness of space. From the sails of ancient explorers to the photos taken from orbit, the evidence seems irrefutable. The Earth is a sphere, a blue marble suspended in a sea of darkness. And yet, in the 21st century, the age of satellites, smartphones, and instant global communication, the flat Earth theory has made an astonishing return. What began as a relic of pre-scientific belief has transformed into a full-fledged digital movement, one that challenges not only astronomy, but the very nature of truth itself, the shape of doubt. The idea of a flat Earth is not new. Ancient civilizations across Mesopotamia, Egypt, and early Greece once imagined the world as a flat disk, surrounded by oceans and capped by the heavens. It wasn't until thinkers like Pythagoras, Aristotle, and later Eratosthenes that the spherical model emerged through observation and geometry. By the time of Columbus, the notion of a round Earth was well established, though often misunderstood in popular culture. So why, after more than 2,000 years of progress, has the flat Earth reappeared? It began quietly in online forums during the early 2000s. A handful of individuals questioned satellite imagery, NASA's authority, and the logic of global curvature. The internet gave them a voice, and soon that voice became a movement. Today, flat Earth conventions, YouTube channels, and social media communities attract thousands of followers. Their claim is simple: we have been lied to. The grand illusion. To the flat Earth believer, the world is not a spinning sphere, but a stationary plane, with the North Pole at the center and Antarctica forming an ice wall around the edges. The sun and moon are small, local lights moving in circles above the plane, while the stars rotate within a vast dome, what they call the firmament. Gravity, they argue, is an illusion. Objects fall not because of mass, but because the Earth accelerates upward at a constant rate. Space, they insist, is fiction, a narrative created to sustain the illusion of a round planet orbiting a star. Why would anyone fabricate such a lie? According to the theory, the deception serves to hide humanity's true nature and place in the universe. Some claim it's a spiritual cover-up, that by denying the firmament and the divine design, science keeps people disconnected from creation. Others say it's political, that space agencies profit from fake space programs, siphoning billions in funding for secret technologies or shadow projects. NASA, the center of the storm. At the heart of the flat Earth revival stands one institution, NASA. The U.S. Space Agency, responsible for everything from the moon landing to Mars rovers, is viewed by believers not as a beacon of exploration, but as the chief architect of illusion. They point to discrepancies in official photos, identical cloud patterns appearing across supposedly separate images of Earth. They highlight footage of astronauts with wires, bubbles, or green screen effects, claiming that even the International Space Station is an elaborate studio production. The flat Earth community often refers to themselves as globe skeptics, arguing that science should welcome questioning rather than suppress it. To them, NASA's monopoly on space imagery makes it both gatekeeper and suspect. If only the agency can show us Earth from orbit, how can we independently verify its claims? To mainstream scientists, such arguments are absurd. The evidence for a spherical Earth is overwhelming, from circumnavigation and satellite orbits to the very way the sun sets. But the persistence of the theory reveals something deeper: a growing mistrust in institutions, experts, and authority. The rise of the digital rebellion. The internet gave flat Earth believers a stage, but algorithms gave them an audience. In the early 2010s, YouTube's recommendation system began promoting conspiratorial content for engagement. a single video questioning space travel could lead viewers down a rabbit hole of elaborate arguments, emotional testimonials, and pseudo-scientific demonstrations. The appeal wasn't in the science, it was in the story. The flat Earth narrative promised revelation. You've been deceived, but you're smart enough to see the truth. That message, wrapped in defiance and curiosity, resonated with people tired of being told what to think. Soon, online influencers turned the belief into a movement. Conferences were held in Denver, London, and Sydney. Flat Earth maps were printed, globes were burned, and experiments were streamed live. Ironically, many of those experiments, such as lasers fired across lakes or gyroscopes measuring Earth's rotation, ended up proving curvature. But even when results contradicted expectations, believers doubled down. That's just the dome, they'd say. That's refraction. That's manipulation. In the age of information, doubt had become its own religion. The science versus the system. Scientists, psychologists, and educators have studied the flat Earth resurgence not to debunk it, it's been debunked countless times, but to understand why it endures. The answer lies in trust. When institutions fail or lie, even about unrelated topics, people begin to question everything. Governments that manipulate, corporations that mislead, and media that distort create fertile ground for skepticism. The flat Earth theory is, in a sense, a mirror held up to society's loss of faith in authority. It's not really about the planet's shape, it's about the belief that truth is being hidden. In that way, it's less a scientific position than a psychological rebellion. And yet, for all its implausibility, the movement forces an uncomfortable reflection. How do we know what we know? Few of us have seen the Earth from space. Most of what we believe rests on trust, in data, in science, in institutions. Once that trust breaks, every truth becomes negotiable, beyond the horizon. Even as rockets soar and satellites map the globe in real time, flat Earth communities continue to grow. For them, the mission isn't to convince scientists, it's to awaken the asleep. They see themselves as guardians of hidden knowledge, fighting against a world that, in their view, has traded curiosity for compliance. But perhaps their greatest irony is this. Though their beliefs reject science, they are driven by the same impulse that birthed it, the desire to question, to see beyond the horizon, to refuse easy answers. It's that human hunger for truth that both unites and divides us. Because in the end, the flat Earth theory is not a failure of science, it's a failure of connection. When people feel alienated from knowledge, they invent their own. When they no longer trust the world, they build a new one in its image, flat, contained, simple, controllable. And while the Earth continues to spin silently beneath the stars, the argument rages on, not in laboratories but online, where truth has become just another theory, and the edge of the world isn't a physical boundary, but a digital one. Maybe the real question isn't whether the Earth is flat or round. Maybe it's this. When belief becomes stronger than evidence, which one defines reality? Since the dawn of time, humanity has stared into the heavens and wondered where we came from. Ancient myths spoke of gods descending from the sky, shaping mankind from clay, and breathing life into their creation. Modern science replaced those stories with evolution, slow, random, natural. But between divine creation and Darwinian chance, another possibility lingers in the shadows of our imagination. What if we were designed not by gods or nature, but by visitors from the stars? This theory, controversial, seductive, and unnerving, is known as the alien DNA hypothesis. It suggests that humanity's genetic code bears traces of deliberate engineering, that our species may not be entirely of earthly origin. To believers, it explains our sudden leap from primitive primates to conscious beings capable of art, mathematics, and flight. To skeptics, it's pseudo-science. But even among scientists, the question of why humans are so profoundly different remains a puzzle without a satisfying answer. Some researchers point to the genetic anomalies within our DNA. Out of roughly 20,000 protein-coding genes, only a small fraction account for the massive cognitive leap that separates us from other primates. The difference in genetic code between humans and chimpanzees is less than 2%, yet that 2% gave rise to language, abstract reasoning, and civilization. For decades, geneticists have debated how such a transformation occurred so rapidly, geologically speaking. In 2003, when the Human Genome Project was completed, it revealed something unexpected: segments of DNA that appear to be inserted rather than evolved, sequences without clear ancestral origin. Most are dismissed as junk DNA, leftovers of viral infections or replication errors. But to proponents of the alien design theory, these are signatures, genetic fingerprints left by beings who manipulated early hominids to accelerate their development. One of the most cited advocates of this idea was the late Francis Crick, co-discoverer of the DNA double helix. In 1973, Crick and chemist Leslie Orgel proposed the theory of directed panspermia, the idea that life on Earth may have been seeded intentionally by an advanced extraterrestrial civilization. Crick, a Nobel laureate and no stranger to controversy, speculated that microorganisms or engineered genetic material could have been sent to Earth on spacecraft billions of years ago. Though he never claimed aliens designed humans directly, his suggestion opened the door for generations of theorists to imagine what might have come next. Archaeological records only deepen the intrigue. Across the world, ancient civilizations left carvings, tablets, and texts describing sky beings descending in flaming chariots or shining discs. The Sumerians called them the Anunnaki, divine visitors who brought knowledge and technology. The Dogon tribe of Mali told of beings from the Sirius star system who taught them advanced astronomy centuries before telescopes existed. Even the Bible's book of Genesis speaks of the sons of God who took human wives. Interpretations vary, but the imagery echoes the same idea: beings from the heavens altering humanity's destiny. In 1976, author Zecharia Sitchin reignited global fascination with his book, The 12th Planet. He claimed to have decoded ancient Sumerian tablets describing a planet called Nibiru, whose inhabitants genetically engineered humans as a labor force to mine gold. According to his narrative, the Anunnaki fused their own DNA with that of early hominids, creating Homo sapiens as a hybrid species, part Earth, part elsewhere. Mainstream scholars reject Sitchin's interpretations, citing translation errors and lack of empirical evidence. But the myth persists, evolving with new discoveries in genetics and astronomy. Each time scientists uncover another Earth-like planet or trace amino acids on meteorites, the idea gains another whisper of plausibility. In the modern age, UFO encounters and alien abduction accounts have taken the place of ancient myths. Many who claim contact describe experiments, biological sampling, or genetic manipulation. The patterns are eerily consistent: humanoid beings collecting DNA, embryos, or reproductive material. Could these stories, dismissed as delusion or dream, be fragments of a larger truth, a continuation of the same intervention that began millennia ago? In 2013, researchers analyzing a meteorite found in Sri Lanka reported microfossil-like structures embedded within it. Some biologists suggested they might be remnants of extraterrestrial microorganisms. Though later debated, the discovery reignited the question of whether life, perhaps even intelligent design, truly began beyond Earth. To understand why the alien DNA theory captivates so many, one must consider what it promises. Evolution explains the mechanism of life, but not its spark. Religion gives purpose, but often demands faith. The alien design hypothesis offers something between, a narrative where science and myth converge. It imagines a universe teeming with intelligence and humanity as part of a vast experiment, a link in an unending chain of creation. Even modern genetics reveals strange coincidences. Certain viral DNA sequences within the human genome appear almost engineered for adaptability, granting us resistance to disease and accelerated neural development. Some researchers studying ancient DNA note that Neanderthals and Denisovans, our evolutionary cousins, vanished soon after humans emerged. Was it simple competition, or did something intervene to ensure one species, ours, would dominate? Skeptics argue that invoking aliens is unnecessary when evolution already explains complexity. But even Richard Dawkins, the famed evolutionary biologist, once admitted in an interview that it's possible life was seeded by an advanced civilization, though he emphasized that it only moves the question one step further. Who designed the designers? Perhaps that's the point. The alien DNA theory doesn't end questions, it multiplies them. If humanity was engineered, then so were our creators and theirs before them. Somewhere, at the top of this infinite hierarchy, lies the true origin of consciousness, a cosmic recursion of creation. What makes this theory haunting is not its proof, but its resonance. It offers a framework that feels ancient and modern all at once. Our myths, our faiths, even our curiosity about space, all point upward. And in the deep quiet of the night sky, the stars themselves seem to whisper of memory, of something watching, guiding, shaping. Maybe the architects are long gone. Maybe they still watch, disguised as distant civilizations studying their creation. Or maybe, through us, they continue their work. Our science, our technology, our drive to explore the universe is the same creative impulse that once sculpted us. And if one day we reach the stars and seed another world with life, will that make us gods, or simply the next link in an endless cycle of design? The truth of our origin may be encrypted in our very blood, waiting for the right frequency, the right discovery to awaken it. Until then, we remain what we have always been, half mystery, half miracle, creatures of the earth, carrying within us the code of the cosmos itself. In the bright halls of modern medicine, the promise is simple: healing through progress, science as salvation. Every year, new drugs, treatments and technologies are unveiled, each one claiming to bring us closer to a healthier world. Yet behind the glossy advertisements, smiling doctors, and billion-dollar research labs, another story has taken shape, a darker one. It whispers of cures discovered and buried, of scientists silenced, and of a system that thrives not on healing, but on illness itself. The hidden cures theory suggests that the greatest medical breakthroughs, true cures for cancer, AIDS, diabetes, and other major diseases, have been discovered, only to be suppressed by powerful pharmaceutical interests. According to this belief, the global health industry doesn't want a cure. It wants customers. A cured patient is lost revenue. A chronically ill one guarantees profit. To some, that idea sounds cynical, even conspiratorial, but to others, it feels uncomfortably plausible. The modern pharmaceutical market is worth over $1 trillion annually. A single medication can generate billions in recurring sales. When entire economies depend on treatment rather than prevention, incentives become distorted. The business of sickness is one of the most profitable enterprises on earth. Whispers of hidden cures began decades ago. In the 1950s, scientists like Royal Raymond Rife claimed to have developed frequency-based devices that could destroy cancer cells without harming healthy tissue. Rife's beam ray technology was tested, then mysteriously vanished from mainstream medicine. Laboratories were shut down, equipment seized, and Rife himself was discredited. Supporters believe his work was buried under pressure from pharmaceutical giants and medical boards unwilling to let a simple, non-drug treatment threaten their empire. In the 1980s, similar stories emerged around Stanislaw Burzynski, a biochemist who developed anti-neoplastons, compounds said to naturally regulate cancer cell growth. Despite reported success in terminal patients, Burzynski faced decades of legal battles with the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. His supporters insist that the system targeted him not because his treatment failed, but because it worked, without generating profits for Big Pharma. Over time, countless inventors, researchers, and holistic healers have claimed to stumble upon unconventional cures, herbal compounds from remote rainforests, electromagnetic resonance therapies, even sound frequency treatments echoing Rife's designs. Each time, their discoveries were either dismissed, bought out, or mysteriously buried under legal, financial, or reputational ruin. Coincidence or coordination? The pharmaceutical industry operates through patents, legal monopolies on molecules, formulas, and manufacturing methods. A natural compound cannot be patented. A cure derived from a plant, fruit, or mineral can be replicated freely, meaning no exclusive profit. This, theorists argue, explains why modern medicine favors synthetic drugs over natural ones. The cure may already exist in nature, but without profit, it remains neglected. Stories persist of natural substances showing remarkable effects. Cannabis oil in pain and seizure control, turmeric and curcumin in inflammation reduction, vitamin B17, amygdalin in cancer therapy, and even mushroom extracts known to stimulate immune response. Some research supports these claims, others dismiss them as pseudoscience. But the fact that billions are spent each year to patent synthetic analogues of these natural compounds raises questions about motive. At the heart of this conspiracy lies one word: control. By managing access to medicine, corporations control life itself. They dictate who gets treated, how much it costs, and what alternatives are deemed safe. They fund the trials, influence the regulations, and often employ the very experts who sit on advisory boards. In this web of influence, truth becomes negotiable. There are real precedents. In 1999, a major pharmaceutical company was fined for concealing data that showed one of its painkillers increased heart attack risk. In 2009, another was exposed for ghostwriting medical papers and paying physicians to endorse its antidepressants. In 2021, lawsuits revealed internal emails showing executives discussing how to extend treatment life cycles for chronic conditions. None of these cases prove that cures are being hidden, but they show that profits can outweigh ethics. The structure of modern healthcare ensures that revenue flows not from eradication, but management. Cancer treatments, for example, represent hundreds of billions of dollars annually, an endless cycle of chemotherapy, radiation, and immunotherapy. What would happen to that industry if a universal, low-cost cure emerged? What would happen to insurance systems, hospitals, and entire economies built around chronic care? Even within the system, some doctors have spoken out. Anonymous insiders claim that promising research, especially in regenerative medicine and genetic repair, has been quietly shelved or redirected. The technologies exist: stem cell therapies that could regrow damaged organs, CRISPR-based treatments that could edit defective genes. Yet progress moves glacially, often bogged down by regulatory delays or funding reallocation. The result? Treatments that could end diseases remain trapped in laboratories, while the old, profitable methods continue. Supporters of the hidden cures theory often cite the fate of Dr. Brzezinski's film Cancer is Serious Business and similar documentaries, many of which faced censorship on streaming platforms or takedowns from video hosts. They see this as proof of suppression, not just of science, but of truth itself. Critics argue that the conspiracy overestimates coordination, that no global cartel could silence every scientist, every lab. But history shows how industries protect themselves. The tobacco companies did it for decades, denying harm while evidence mounted. Fossil fuel corporations still do it today. Why would medicine, an industry even more essential, be any different? The fear that someone holds the key to life and keeps it hidden cuts deep because it reverses the role of science. We're taught to believe progress is for the good of all, that knowledge once found belongs to humanity. The hidden cures theory challenges that faith. It suggests that science, like any power, can be corrupted, that healing itself can become a weapon of control. And yet hope persists. The Internet has given rise to independent researchers, open-source medical communities, and biohackers sharing discoveries outside corporate structures. Herbal medicine, ancient remedies, and alternative therapies have found new life under the digital sun. Whether their claims are real or imagined, they represent something vital: the refusal to let profit define truth. Perhaps the greatest irony is that both sides claim to fight for the same goal: a healthier humanity, one through systems and regulation, the other through rebellion and risk. Between them lies a truth that's hard to quantify: that the cure for illness might not just be chemical, but ethical, that healing our bodies requires healing our trust. Maybe there is no single hidden cure, no magic serum locked in a vault. Or maybe there are many, each buried under patents, politics, and fear. Either way, the question that lingers is the same. If a cure existed that could end suffering forever, would our world truly be ready to release it? Beneath the endless white of Antarctica lies a silence older than humanity. A continent frozen in myth and guarded by secrecy, its vast sheet of ice stretches across more than 5 million square miles, covering mountain ranges, valleys, and ancient lakes untouched for millions of years. To the world, it's a place of science and isolation. But to those who question the official story, Antarctica is something else, a forbidden zone hiding secrets too vast for the public to know. The Antarctica mystery has become one of the most enduring scientific conspiracies of modern times. Its roots are tangled in history, exploration, and geopolitics. Officially, the continent is governed by the Antarctic Treaty, signed in 1959 by over 60 nations, which bans military activity, resource exploitation, and permanent human settlement. It was meant to preserve Antarctica as a scientific sanctuary. Yet to many that treaty feels less like protection and more like restriction, a global lock on a place humanity is not meant to enter. Stories of strange discoveries beneath the ice began with the earliest explorers. In 1838, the American expedition led by Charles Wilkes reported seeing earthly features that defied explanation. Later, during World War II, the Nazis allegedly launched Operation High Jump, a secret mission to Antarctica led by Admiral Richard Byrd. Officially, it was a mapping expedition. But conspiracy theorists claim that the Nazis discovered something extraordinary, an ancient underground structure, or even contact with otherworldly beings, and that they built hidden bases beneath the polar ice. In 1947, Byrd returned from his own expedition making cryptic comments to the press, warning that the United States must prepare to defend itself from enemy aircraft that can fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. The words were recorded and published, then quietly forgotten. Official records of the mission describe no such encounter, but to believers, Byrd had stumbled upon something beyond conventional technology, either remnants of an ancient civilization or evidence of extraterrestrial contact. Satellite images over the decades have only fueled the speculation. Photographs showing vast, dark openings near the South Pole, sometimes described as entrances to underground tunnels, circulate online as alleged proof of hidden facilities. NASA attributes them to shadows and optical effects, but theories persist. Some claim these entrances lead to enormous caverns warmed by geothermal vents, housing ecosystems and perhaps civilizations that have remained sealed off from the surface world for eons. One of the most persistent legends is that of Lake Vostok, buried 2 miles beneath the ice. It's a body of water untouched for at least 15 million years, isolated from the atmosphere since before humans existed. When Russian scientists drilled into it in 2012, they claimed to have found previously unknown microbial life. Then communication from the team abruptly ceased for several days. Rumors spread that the scientists had discovered something unexpected: structures, artifacts, or even preserved organisms of non-human origin. When contact resumed, officials said the delay was due to technical issues. The mystery deepened when reports surfaced of massive magnetic anomalies detected beneath the ice, distortions large enough to suggest metal-rich formations or artificial objects. Some researchers have speculated about an asteroid impact, others about remnants of an ancient civilization buried under glacial sediment. The most extreme theories go further, that Antarctica hides an alien craft or technology older than recorded history. Over the years, several prominent figures have made unusual visits to Antarctica, further fueling speculation. Among them were political leaders, religious figures, and even astronauts. Each visit sparked questions. Why would they travel to one of the most inhospitable places on Earth? The official explanations varied: scientific collaboration, environmental awareness, symbolic diplomacy. Yet, for conspiracy communities, these trips pointed to something hidden, perhaps a discovery so profound it required global coordination to conceal. Whistleblowers and fringe researchers claim that the ice conceals the remains of an advanced pre-human civilization, sometimes called Atlantis of the South, that was buried during a sudden pole shift thousands of years ago. According to this theory, ancient structures lie entombed beneath miles of frozen water, perfectly preserved, waiting to be uncovered when the climate warms. Some go further, suggesting that governments already know and are quietly excavating sites, keeping discoveries classified under defense secrecy laws. The idea of a lost civilization beneath Antarctica might sound like fantasy, yet science has confirmed that the continent was once temperate and green. Fossilized plants and marine life reveal that it was not always a wasteland of ice. Geological models show that Antarctica once sat closer to the equator before continental drift carried it south. Could remnants of early intelligent life, human or otherwise, be preserved beneath the glaciers? Adding to the enigma are the strange no-fly zones established over certain regions. Officially, they exist to protect research stations and ensure flight safety in extreme conditions. But theorists suspect that those zones mark the locations of hidden installations, perhaps ancient or alien. Unverified reports speak of satellite feeds that are digitally scrubbed, images blurred or replaced with artificial snow patterns. Whatever lies beneath those coordinates, the world isn't meant to see it. Then there are the whispers of energy readings, heat signatures that don't align with the natural environment, detected by satellites deep beneath the ice shelf. Some interpret these as volcanic activity, others claim they indicate something else. Massive power sources or reactors still running, dormant or active. If such anomalies exist, they would rewrite what we know of both geology and history. In recent years, as climate change slowly thins the Antarctic ice, scientists have begun discovering long-hidden landscapes, canyons deeper than the Grand Canyon, mountains taller than the Alps, lakes the size of major cities. It's a world within a world, untouched, unexplored, and possibly holding evidence of something that defies our understanding of the past. For skeptics, Antarctica's mystery is one of imagination, a blank canvas for every human fear and fantasy. But for believers, it is the ultimate secret, protected by global cooperation. The fact that every major nation on Earth agreed to limit exploration there only amplifies suspicion. Since when has humanity ever agreed on anything, unless there was something it couldn't afford to expose? The Antarctica mystery endures because it touches something primal in us. The sense that not all of Earth's history has been told, that beneath our feet lies evidence of forgotten epochs, maybe even forgotten masters. Whether it's the remnants of Atlantis, a Nazi stronghold, or the tomb of an extraterrestrial visitor, Antarctica remains the last blank space on the map, the one frontier that still refuses to yield its truth. And as the ice slowly melts, revealing shapes and shadows no human eyes have seen in millennia, we can't help but wonder, when the last layer of frost is gone, what will emerge from the silence? Reality feels stable, solid beneath our feet, predictable in its rhythm. The past seems permanent, unchanging, written in stone. Yet for millions of people around the world, cracks have begun to appear in that certainty. Memories no longer align with recorded history. Words, logos, movie lines, and even the deaths of famous figures are remembered differently, collectively, consistently, but impossibly. It is called the Mandela effect, and for some it is more than faulty memory. It is evidence that we are living between shifting timelines, fragments of a multiverse colliding. The phenomenon gets its name from Nelson Mandela, the South African leader many people distinctly remember dying in prison during the 1980s. They recall seeing televised funerals, emotional eulogies, even interviews with mourners. But Mandela, of course, lived until 2013. When the internet connected millions of such conflicting recollections, a new kind of mystery was born, one that felt personal, undeniable, and cosmic all at once. It started with small details. People swore the children's book series was called The Berenstain Bears, not The Berenstain Bears. Others insisted the Monopoly man wore a monocle, or that the Fruit of the Loom logo once had a cornucopia behind the fruit. The line from Star Wars, "Luke, I am your father," was never actually said that way, nor was "mirror, mirror on the wall." Even geography and anatomy seemed to shift. South America appearing further east than remembered, the human heart slightly off-center. Each detail by itself could be dismissed as error. But the sheer volume, consistency, and emotional certainty behind them made the phenomenon impossible to ignore. Psychologists offer a simple explanation: the fallibility of human memory. Memory, they say, isn't a recording, it's reconstruction. Each time we recall something, we rebuild it, blending truth, suggestion, and imagination. Over time, stories spread, misheard phrases become facts, and collective reinforcement creates mass misremembering. It's a comforting explanation, scientific, rational, safe. But it doesn't satisfy everyone. Because some of these memories are not just similar, they're identical. Thousands of strangers across cultures recall the same version of events that, according to history, never happened. Forums fill with confessions from people who swear they remember a world that no longer exists. And the emotion they describe is not confusion, it's displacement. They feel as if they've woken in a slightly different reality, familiar but off by degrees. What if they're right? Quantum physics has long entertained the many worlds interpretation proposed by Hugh Everett in 1957. It suggests that every possible outcome of every event splits the universe into separate branches, infinite in number. In one, Mandela died in prison. In another, he lived. In one, Berenstein was spelled with an E. In another, it wasn't. If these universes exist side by side, what would happen if they occasionally overlapped or merged? Would fragments of memory remain, ghostly evidence of a different timeline we once inhabited? Some theorists believe that's exactly what's happening. They propose that massive energetic events, nuclear tests, experiments with high-energy particle accelerators like CERN, or global shifts in consciousness, may trigger microscopic tears in the quantum fabric separating realities. When those seams reweave, the worlds blend slightly, rewriting details while leaving our memories intact. The result? People who remember what once was, stranded in a world where it never occurred. It sounds impossible, but quantum physics already defies common sense. Particles exist in two states at once. Observation changes reality. Entanglement connects objects across vast distances instantly. If consciousness itself is part of this quantum web, then perhaps memory is too. Maybe we are not remembering wrongly, we are remembering correctly from another version of the universe. The Mandela effect isn't limited to pop culture or geography. Some people claim personal details have changed, scars that vanished, family members whose birth dates shifted, events that seemed rewritten. The deeper you look, the stranger it gets. People describe waking up one day with the unshakable feeling that something is off, not a dream, not imagination, but a subtle wrongness in the air, like a song played half a note too slow. They recognize their lives, their homes, their loved ones, but something doesn't fit. The internet has become a global archive of these anomalies. Entire databases catalog differences between universes, from logo designs to celebrity fates. The phrase, "we slid timelines," has become common language in these communities, describing a collective migration between realities. Critics call it delusion. Believers call it awakening. There are theories that consciousness itself acts as a stabilizer between worlds. When enough people focus on one version of reality, that version solidifies. When belief fractures, so does the timeline. Under that idea, humanity is not merely an observer of the universe, it's a participant, co-creating it with thought and memory. The Mandela effect, then, would be evidence of mass consciousness drift, a sign that our collective reality is shifting under the weight of our divided perception. There's another, darker interpretation, that the shifts aren't accidental. Some conspiracists point toward advanced technologies capable of manipulating electromagnetic or gravitational fields, suggesting that timeline engineering might already exist. If time is a dimension of space and space can be bent, then perhaps reality itself can be rewritten by those who understand the code. The anomalies we notice, the changed logos, the false memories, might be byproducts of something far larger, an experiment in altering the past without the rest of us knowing. Even skeptics find one aspect hard to dismiss: the emotional certainty of the people affected. These aren't vague recollections. They're memories rooted in emotion, nostalgia, and life experience. People describe remembering a world that felt slightly different. Its light, its energy, even its pace. How can thousands share the same illusion with identical detail? Is mass misremembering powerful enough to overwrite history itself? Philosophically, the Mandela effect invites us to question what reality even means. If our memories shape our sense of truth, and those memories can change, then reality becomes fluid, a mirror that bends when we stare too long. Maybe the universe isn't a fixed stage, but a living, adaptive system responding to our observation. Maybe it's not the world that changes, but us. For many, the Mandela effect is terrifying. It undermines the very foundation of existence, what we see, what we know, what we are. But for others, it's liberating. It suggests that reality is not a prison of rules, but a canvas, mutable and alive, that we are not victims of a changing world, but participants in its evolution. Whether it's quantum crossover, government manipulation, or the power of collective mind, the Mandela effect forces us to confront the possibility that the universe is far stranger and far less stable than we ever imagined. And as more people awaken to memories that no longer fit, one haunting question remains. If the past can change, how can we ever trust the present? Reality feels stable, solid beneath our feet, predictable in its rhythm. The past seems permanent, unchanging, written in stone. Yet for millions of people around the world, cracks have begun to appear in that certainty. Memories no longer align with recorded history. Words, logos, movie lines, and even the deaths of famous figures are remembered differently, collectively, consistently, but impossibly. It is called the Mandela effect, and for some, it is more than faulty memory. It is evidence that we are living between shifting timelines, fragments of a multiverse colliding. The phenomenon gets its name from Nelson Mandela, the South African leader many people distinctly remember dying in prison during the 1980s. They recall seeing televised funerals, emotional eulogies, even interviews with mourners. But Mandela, of course, lived until 2013. When the internet connected millions of such conflicting recollections, a new kind of mystery was born, one that felt personal, undeniable, and cosmic all at once. It started with small details. People swore the children's book series was called The Berenstain Bears, not The Berenstain Bears. Others insisted the Monopoly man wore a monocle, or that the Fruit of the Loom logo once had a cornucopia behind the fruit. The line from Star Wars, "Luke, I am your father," was never actually said that way, nor was "Mirror, mirror on the wall." Even geography and anatomy seemed to shift. South America appearing further east than remembered, the human heart slightly off-center. Each detail by itself could be dismissed as error. But the sheer volume, consistency, and emotional certainty behind them made the phenomenon impossible to ignore. Psychologists offer a simple explanation: the fallibility of human memory. Memory, they say, isn't a recording, it's reconstruction. Each time we recall something, we rebuild it, blending truth, suggestion, and imagination. Over time, stories spread. Misheard phrases become facts, and collective reinforcement creates mass misremembering. It's a comforting explanation, scientific, rational, safe. But it doesn't satisfy everyone, because some of these memories are not just similar, they're identical. Thousands of strangers across cultures recall the same version of events that, according to history, never happened. Forums fill with confessions from people who swear they remember a world that no longer exists. And the emotion they describe is not confusion, it's displacement. They feel as if they've woken in a slightly different reality, familiar but off by degrees. What if they're right? Quantum physics has long entertained the many worlds interpretation proposed by Hugh Everett in 1957. It suggests that every possible outcome of every event splits the universe into separate branches, infinite in number. In one, Mandela died in prison. In another, he lived. In one, Berenstein was spelled with an E. In another, it wasn't. If these universes exist side by side, what would happen if they occasionally overlapped or merged? Would fragments of memory remain, ghostly evidence of a different timeline we once inhabited? Some theorists believe that's exactly what's happening. They propose that massive energetic events, nuclear tests, experiments with high-energy particle accelerators like CERN, or global shifts in consciousness, may trigger microscopic tears in the quantum fabric separating realities. When those seams reweave, the worlds blend slightly, rewriting details while leaving our memories intact. The result? People who remember what once was, stranded in a world where it never occurred. It sounds impossible, but quantum physics already defies common sense. Particles exist in two states at once. Observation changes reality. Entanglement connects objects across vast distances instantly. If consciousness itself is part of this quantum web, then perhaps memory is too. Maybe we are not remembering wrongly. We are remembering correctly from another version of the universe. The Mandela effect isn't limited to pop culture or geography. Some people claim personal details have changed, scars that vanished, family members whose birth dates shifted, events that seemed rewritten. The deeper you look, the stranger it gets. People describe waking up one day with the unshakable feeling that something is off. Not a dream, not imagination, but a subtle wrongness in the air, like a song played half a note too slow. They recognize their lives, their homes, their loved ones, but something doesn't fit. The internet has become a global archive of these anomalies. Entire databases catalog differences between universes, from logo designs to celebrity fates. The phrase, "we slid timelines," has become common language in these communities, describing a collective migration between realities. Critics call it delusion. Believers call it awakening. There are theories that consciousness itself acts as a stabilizer between worlds. When enough people focus on one version of reality, that version solidifies. When belief fractures, so does the timeline. Under that idea, humanity is not merely an observer of the universe. It's a participant, co-creating it with thought and memory. The Mandela effect, then, would be evidence of mass consciousness drift, a sign that our collective reality is shifting under the weight of our divided perception. There's another, darker interpretation, that the shifts aren't accidental. Some conspiracists point toward advanced technologies capable of manipulating electromagnetic or gravitational fields, suggesting that timeline engineering might already exist. If time is a dimension of space, and space can be bent, then perhaps reality itself can be rewritten by those who understand the code. The anomalies we notice, the changed logos, the false memories, might be byproducts of something far larger, an experiment in altering the past, without the rest of us knowing. Even skeptics find one aspect hard to dismiss: the emotional certainty of the people affected. These aren't vague recollections. They're memories rooted in emotion, nostalgia, and life experience. People describe remembering a world that felt slightly different, its light, its energy, even its pace. How can thousands share the same illusion with identical detail? Is mass misremembering powerful enough to overwrite history itself? Philosophically, the Mandela effect invites us to question what reality even means. If our memories shape our sense of truth, and those memories can change, then reality becomes fluid, a mirror that bends when we stare too long. Maybe the universe isn't a fixed stage, but a living, adaptive system responding to our observation. Maybe it's not the world that changes, but us. For many, the Mandela effect is terrifying. It undermines the very foundation of existence, what we see, what we know, what we are. But for others, it's liberating. It suggests that reality is not a prison of rules, but a canvas, mutable and alive, that we are not victims of a changing world, but participants in its evolution. Whether it's quantum crossover, government manipulation, or the power of collective mind, the Mandela effect forces us to confront the possibility that the universe is far stranger and far less stable than we ever imagined. And as more people awaken to memories that no longer fit, one haunting question remains: if the past can change, how can we ever trust the present? During the great pandemic of the 21st century, the world turned to science for salvation. Laboratories raced against time, governments invested trillions, and humanity waited for a cure that could end the invisible war. Yet, as needles entered arms across continents, another story spread just as quickly. One not of healing, but of control. It claimed that inside the vaccines, beneath the chemistry of protection, hid something metallic, technological, and deliberate. Microchips designed to track, monitor, or even influence human behavior. The vaccine microchip theory grew in the fertile soil of fear and confusion. When entire nations were locked down and lives depended on unseen scientists, suspicion became a kind of defense mechanism. Social media amplified that suspicion into certainty. Videos claimed to show magnets sticking to injection sites, mysterious codes embedded in medical records, and patents hinting at electronic implants disguised as medicine. It sounded fantastical, science fiction rewritten as news. But the idea resonated because it spoke to something deeper than infection: the loss of autonomy. The theory's origins trace back to older anxieties about surveillance. For decades, futurists and journalists had speculated about microchips under the skin, tiny RFID tags capable of storing identity data or transmitting location signals. In limited forms, such devices existed. Some companies experimented with voluntary implants for employee access badges or medical records. So when vaccines became mandatory for travel, work, and daily life, the leap from real technology to hidden agenda was small. People began to ask, what if the infrastructure for tracking already existed, hidden beneath a global health initiative? At the center of this web of speculation stood a familiar name: Bill Gates. In April 2020, a misinterpreted statement he made about digital certificates of immunity ignited a firestorm. Conspiracy forums reinterpreted his words as evidence of a microchip plot, claiming that his foundation's investment in biotech companies masked a plan for mass identification. Articles and memes spread faster than the virus itself, depicting a dystopian world where every citizen carried an invisible tag, where vaccination equaled surveillance. The imagery was haunting, a needle as both cure and cage. Scientists responded with data. There are no chips in vaccines, they said. The doses are clear liquids containing only biological compounds, mRNA, lipids, salts, sugars. No metal, no circuits, no transmitters. The syringes are too narrow to deliver anything electronic. Each batch is independently verified by regulatory agencies. The physics alone makes the theory impossible. But rational arguments do little against fear. Once an idea enters the bloodstream of public imagination, it mutates faster than truth can contain it. Part of the myth's endurance comes from how it merges fact and fiction. Microchip implants do exist. Biometric surveillance does exist. Digital vaccine passports were indeed proposed. When people saw these separate realities converging during a crisis, it felt less like paranoia and more like pattern recognition. After all, in a world where every phone tracks its user and every purchase leaves a digital trace, is it truly unthinkable that the body itself might become the next device? Some versions of the theory reached into even stranger territory. They claimed that nanoparticles within the vaccine acted as receivers for 5G frequencies, forming a global network of biodigital sensors. Others said the injections altered DNA, turning people into organic transmitters capable of remote influence. Photos circulated of vials under blue light, glowing faintly. Proof, believers said, of embedded circuitry. In reality, the glow came from harmless fluorescent markers used in research. But by then, the myth had transcended science. It had become a story about trust. At its core, the microchip narrative is not about technology, it's about control. It imagines a world where medicine becomes a weapon of obedience, where care masks coercion. It channels centuries of fear toward authority, kings, priests, governments, corporations, refracted through the lens of modern technology. Every pandemic creates both a biological contagion and a psychological one. When people feel powerless, they reach for explanations that restore a sense of agency, even if those explanations terrify them. The irony is that real surveillance doesn't require microchips at all. It's already here, embedded not under our skin, but in our screens, our data, our habits. Smartphones log locations, smartwatches record heartbeats, social networks map desires and fears. The true tracking network is voluntary, built on convenience and addiction. The vaccine myth simply projects that reality onto a smaller, more personal canvas, the body itself. Governments, in their effort to combat misinformation, sometimes made the problem worse. Fact-checking campaigns, bans, and censorship on social media convinced skeptics that truth was being hidden. Deleted posts became forbidden knowledge. Every denial became confirmation. In this atmosphere, science was no longer the language of reassurance. It was the language of authority, and authority was no longer trusted. The pandemic magnified the fracture between individual freedom and collective responsibility. To some, the syringe symbolized solidarity, to others, submission. The idea of microchips captured that divide perfectly. A needle that saves and enslaves in the same motion. It transformed a medical question into a spiritual one. Do we belong to ourselves or to the system that protects us? Psychologists studying conspiracy movements note that such beliefs often arise where information overload meets emotional exhaustion. When facts are too complex, people default to narratives that feel coherent. The microchip theory is simple: invisible power, invisible device, invisible control. It gives shape to the anxiety of living in a world where our data moves faster than our understanding. Still, beneath the hysteria lies a real debate about the future of human biology and technology. Scientists are developing injectable sensors that can monitor glucose levels, detect infection, or track organ health. Nanoparticles may soon deliver medicine directly to targeted cells. The line between biotechnology and surveillance grows thinner each year. Today's rumor could be tomorrow's ethical dilemma. The fear of implanted control, however misplaced, reflects a truth about our trajectory. We are merging with our machines, one invention at a time. Perhaps the vaccine microchip myth is less a lie than a warning, a distorted reflection of where humanity is heading. A century from now, it may be routine to carry microscopic devices that manage our health, memory, or identity. The question will not be whether such technology exists, but who controls it and why. For now, the only chip inside a vaccinated body is metaphorical, the seed of doubt, small and persistent, lodged in the mind. It doesn't transmit signals or data, but it shapes perception. And as billions of people look at the same sky, the same screens, and wonder who's really in control, that invisible thought spreads farther than any microchip ever could. Deep beneath the surface of our planet lies a mystery as old as mythology itself, the idea that the Earth is not solid, but hollow, that within its unseen chambers lies a second world, illuminated by an inner sun, inhabited by ancient beings, perhaps even the ancestors of humanity itself. This is the Hollow Earth theory, one of the most enduring and fascinating scientific conspiracies ever imagined. It bridges folklore and physics, science and mysticism, and suggests that everything we know about the world beneath our feet might be an illusion. To most, the Earth's interior is well understood. Modern geology tells us of layers: the crust, mantle, outer core, and inner core, a solid ball of iron and nickel spinning at unimaginable pressure and heat. But for centuries, explorers, philosophers, and even scientists questioned that model. The theory began in earnest in 1692, when English astronomer Edmund Halley, the same man who predicted the return of Halley's comet, proposed that Earth consisted of multiple concentric shells, each with its own atmosphere and possibly life. His calculations of magnetic anomalies suggested a planet more complex than solid stone. Over time, others expanded on Halley's idea. In the 19th century, John Cleves Simmes, Jr., an American Army officer, became the most famous advocate for the hollow Earth. He claimed that enormous openings at the poles led into vast interior lands, and he petitioned Congress to fund an expedition. Though dismissed as eccentric, Simmes inspired generations of explorers and authors, from Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth to modern-day theorists who believe his claims were more than fiction. According to these believers, the entrances to the inner world are not imaginary. They exist, hidden beneath the polar ice caps, protected by governments and disguised by satellite imagery. Some point to the mysterious no-fly zones over the Arctic and Antarctic as evidence of concealed gateways. Others insist that ancient maps, such as the 16th century Piri Reis map, show land masses at the South Pole long before they were discovered, proof of forgotten civilizations that once knew of the inner world. But what would a hollow Earth look like? The most popular depiction envisions a vast, habitable realm on the concave inner surface of the planet, lit by a central glowing core, a miniature sun. Gravity, under this model, pulls outward from the inner shell, allowing life to thrive upside down relative to our own orientation. Rivers flow upward, mountains curve inward, and an entire ecosystem, lush, hidden, untouched by human hands, exists in perpetual twilight. Tales from mythology and folklore seem to echo this idea. Almost every ancient culture speaks of an underworld, not merely a realm of the dead, but a living domain beneath the surface. The Greeks called it Hades, the Hindus spoke of Patala, and the Norse described Svartalfheim, home of the dark elves. Indigenous legends from the Americas speak of ancestors who emerged from underground cities after great cataclysms. Could these myths be distorted memories of a real subterranean civilization? In modern times, the theory gained new energy after Admiral Richard E. Byrd's alleged diary surfaced online. The document, though widely considered a hoax, describes a secret flight into the North Pole in 1947, during which Byrd claims to have entered a lush inner world inhabited by beings with advanced technology and radiant light. The diary speaks of aircraft with anti-gravity propulsion and messages warning humanity against nuclear war. While skeptics dismiss it as fantasy, believers cite Byrd's military rank and historical expeditions as reasons to take it seriously. Even science has not been entirely immune to the allure of the hollow Earth. In 2014, researchers discovered massive underground voids and mantle plumes large enough to swallow mountains, leading some to speculate whether unknown cavities could exist deeper still. Seismic readings reveal strange echoes, zones where waves behave unpredictably, as though bouncing off something hollow or dense beyond current explanation. Could those anomalies hint at hidden chambers large enough to sustain life? One of the most fascinating extensions of the Hollow Earth theory involves Agartha, a legendary subterranean kingdom said to be home to enlightened beings. In the early 20th century, writers such as Ferdinand Ossendowski and later theosophists claimed that Agartha was ruled by a supreme king, the king of the world, who guided human destiny from below, influencing civilizations through psychic communication. To believers, Agartha is not fantasy but an ancient civilization far older than ours, preserving technologies and wisdom lost to surface humanity. Conspiracy circles have connected the theory to everything from Nazi exploration to UFO sightings. It is said that during World War II, German expeditions sought the entrances to the inner Earth, believing it to be the refuge of the Aryan gods. Some versions even claim that after the fall of the Third Reich, high-ranking Nazis fled to underground bases accessed through Antarctica, where they encountered or joined subterranean civilizations. These claims, unproven and fantastical, still captivate imaginations, merging science fiction with history's darkest chapters. Skeptics point to overwhelming geological evidence. Seismic waves, gravitational data, and volcanic activity all confirm a dense, molten core rather than hollow space. Yet the hollow Earth persists because it's not just a scientific idea. It's a psychological one. It represents the human urge to believe that the unknown still exists, that mysteries remain beneath the surface of modern certainty. It speaks to a longing for escape, for a paradise untouched by war, pollution, or corruption, a hidden Eden waiting below. Modern proponents interpret the theory in spiritual rather than literal terms. They see the hollow Earth as a symbol of inner awakening, the world within that mirrors the human subconscious. Just as explorers in myths descend into caves to find wisdom, so too must humanity look inward to rediscover its lost connection to nature and truth. The inner world, in this sense, becomes both a physical and metaphysical refuge. Whether as metaphor or mystery, the idea endures because it defies the arrogance of final knowledge. It reminds us that even after centuries of exploration, we've barely scratched the planet's surface. Beneath the crust, in the dark silence of uncharted depths, there may yet lie echoes of forgotten life. the remnants of civilizations that found their way inward instead of outward. Perhaps one day, when the last layer of secrecy melts away, beneath Antarctica, the Arctic, or the ocean floor, we'll discover that the world is larger inside than it ever appeared from above. And maybe, just maybe, the hollow earth will no longer be a theory, but the next great revelation of what it truly means to live on and within this strange and beautiful planet. They say death is the one truth that unites all living things. Empires fall, stars fade, and even memory dissolves with time. Yet throughout history, humankind has rebelled against that truth, searching for a way to outwit the inevitable. Today, that rebellion wears a lab coat. The pursuit of immortality, once whispered in temples and alchemist chambers, has become the obsession of billionaires, scientists, and secret institutions alike. And some believe that victory has already been achieved, quietly, secretly, and far from public eyes. This is the story of the Immortality Project, a sprawling theory that claims death is no longer the great unknown, but a controlled variable. According to believers, governments and corporations have already developed technologies capable of halting aging, regenerating organs, and even transferring consciousness. But while the wealthy and powerful guard these breakthroughs, the rest of humanity continues to live, age, and die, oblivious to the truth. The roots of this belief stretch back to ancient times. In every culture, there are myths of beings who conquered death. The Sumerian gods, the Taoist immortals, the biblical Methuselah. Alchemists sought the philosopher's stone, promising eternal life. But modern science has turned legend into possibility. We now understand the cellular mechanisms of aging, telomeres shortening, DNA damage, mitochondrial decay. We can clone animals, regrow skin, and reverse senescence in lab mice. If these things are possible in public research, what might be happening in the shadows of classified laboratories? In the early 2000s, whispers began about secret programs investigating biological immortality. Research funded not just by governments, but by private fortune. The most famous of these efforts came from Silicon Valley, where billionaires poured billions into longevity startups. Officially, they were developing anti-aging therapies. Unofficially, theorists claim they were buying time itself. The wealthiest men in history, those who already own the flow of information, were now seeking to own the flow of life. But the Immortality Project, in its conspiratorial form, goes further. It suggests that breakthroughs in nanomedicine, genetic engineering, and consciousness mapping have already succeeded. Elite members of society, scientists, politicians, tech leaders, allegedly receive regenerative treatments that stop cellular decay and restore youth. Evidence? Their faces barely age. Their stamina defies years. The same figures who once looked frail appear decades younger after vanishing from public view for medical reasons. Coincidence or continuity of a new kind? One of the most persistent claims comes from insiders in the biotech world who speak of a treatment known simply as Project Elysium, a rumored initiative merging gene therapy and stem cell infusion to reset biological clocks. Patients supposedly experience complete cellular renewal, their DNA rejuvenated to the equivalent of a 25-year-old body. It's said to be experimental, obscenely expensive, and accessible only through quiet channels. No evidence has ever been verified, but the rumor refuses to die. The theory expands beyond biology. Some believe immortality is being achieved through digital consciousness transfer, the uploading of minds into machines. Publicly, companies like Neuralink, OpenAI, and various neuroscience startups are exploring ways to map the human brain with microscopic precision. In private, theorists claim, those experiments have already succeeded. According to leaked stories, the consciousness of certain individuals has been preserved in advanced quantum servers, an existence without a body, living within simulations so perfect that the subjects may not even realize they've died. If such technology exists, it raises chilling questions. Who decides who lives forever? What becomes of the soul when it's reduced to code? And if consciousness can be copied, does the copy still count as you, or something else entirely? The Immortality Project, in this interpretation, is not a gift, but a trap, a digital prison disguised as salvation. One of the strangest threads in this web connects to cryogenics. For decades, companies have offered to freeze the dead in liquid nitrogen, awaiting the day when science can revive them. Most dismiss it as science fiction, but believers claim that some cryogenic facilities are fronts for advanced rejuvenation experiments, that certain clients were never dead at all, merely preserved in suspended animation while their cells were repaired, their consciousness kept alive through neural interfaces. In essence, a bridge between mortality and resurrection. There are also whispers of military involvement. Since the Cold War, governments have quietly studied human enhancement, super soldiers resistant to pain, fatigue, or aging. Projects like DARPA's Biodesign hinted at programmable life forms immune to decay. Publicly, these programs focus on prosthetics and genetic resilience. Privately, some say they aim to remove the biological limits of human lifespan. If immortality could be weaponized, if a soldier never died, what nation wouldn't want that power? Still, the greatest evidence of the Immortality Project might not be found in labs, but in human behavior. The ultra-rich have begun constructing bunkers, seed vaults, and floating arcologies, preparing for a world reshaped by climate collapse. To skeptics, these are precautionary investments. To believers, they're sanctuaries for an immortal elite, a new species preparing to inherit an empty earth. The poor will perish, the chosen will persist. A biological class divide stretching beyond life itself. But what if immortality has already been achieved in secret, and its side effects are too horrifying to reveal? Some versions of the theory speak of grotesque experiments, subjects who stopped aging but couldn't stop changing, their cells multiplying uncontrollably, minds fracturing under the strain of endless time. If such attempts went wrong, the results would need to be hidden, underground facilities, vanished researchers, erased records. The dream of eternal life twisted into a nightmare of eternal decay. Philosophers have long warned that immortality might not be paradise, but prison. Without death, meaning collapses. The finite gives life its beauty, the end gives choice its urgency, yet human ambition rarely stops at wisdom. If immortality were within reach, could anyone resist? The theory suggests that some already haven't, that the world's most powerful people have quietly stepped beyond the threshold of mortality, leaving the rest of us to worship the illusion of equality while they build eternity. Perhaps the Immortality Project is just that, an idea, not an operation. But the convergence of technology, wealth, and secrecy makes it feel inevitable. Artificial organs, genetic editing, neural links, all real, all accelerating. We are already dismantling the boundary between life and death, one discovery at a time. Maybe immortality isn't being hidden from us. Maybe it's being tested on us. Our data, our genes, our digital lives feeding the algorithms that will one day replicate their creators forever. And when that day comes, when death finally loses its grip, the only thing left to die may be what makes us human. Deep beneath the Franco-Swiss border lies a machine so powerful it can recreate the first moments of creation. The Large Hadron Collider, operated by CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research, is humanity's most ambitious scientific instrument, a 17-mile underground ring where subatomic particles race at near-light speed before colliding in bursts of unimaginable energy. Its purpose, officially, is noble: to unravel the mysteries of the universe. But to others, it's something far more dangerous. Some believe CERN has already broken reality itself. Since its activation in 2008, the LHC has been both a triumph of science and a magnet for paranoia. The scale of its power, the ability to smash atoms, create miniature black holes, and probe the quantum void, has led many to suspect that the organization's real mission is hidden. The CERN conspiracy claims that the Collider's experiments have tampered with dimensions beyond human comprehension, altering timelines, summoning forces we cannot control, and possibly fracturing the very fabric of the universe. When the LHC was first switched on, fears spread that it might destroy the planet. Lawsuits were filed to stop it. Scientists assured the public that any micro-black holes created would evaporate instantly. The machine ran, and the world survived. Yet strange things began to happen. That same year, mass reports of odd phenomena began circulating: bizarre weather patterns, unexplained hums in the sky, sudden increases in synchronicities, and what would later become known as the Mandela effect: collective memories that no longer matched reality. Coincidence, perhaps? Or maybe, as some claim, the Collider's experiments fractured the multiverse, causing timelines to bleed into each other. CERN's official goal was to find the Higgs boson, the God particle, thought to give mass to matter. They succeeded in 2012, confirming one of the greatest discoveries in physics. But some theorists claim the price was catastrophic. In the instant that the Higgs field was disturbed, reality itself may have shifted. One speculative paper even suggested that if the Higgs field were destabilized, it could cause the universe to collapse at the speed of light, an event we wouldn't perceive because it would happen faster than consciousness could process. If such an accident occurred, could we already be living in the aftermath, a slightly altered copy of the world that existed before? Believers point to subtle differences in memory, geography, and even human behavior since the LHC's activation. They argue that our world feels off, that time moves differently, that reality is less stable. Popular culture has taken notice. Films, TV shows, and art increasingly revolve around multiverse theory, as if society subconsciously senses that something has changed. Some researchers have noted spikes in global anxiety, depression, and reports of déjà vu since 2008, interpreting it as a psychological echo of cosmic interference. Then there are the stranger claims. Some say CERN's particle collisions have opened interdimensional portals, allowing entities from other planes of existence to cross into ours. Videos of experiments showing energy distortions and bizarre lights near the facility are shared online as evidence. Even the organization's own symbolism fuels suspicion. Its logo, which resembles 3 overlapping sixes, is interpreted by some as occult. The statue of Shiva, the Hindu god of destruction and rebirth, standing outside CERN's headquarters, has only intensified fears. Why, ask believers, would scientists erect a monument to a deity who dances the universe into annihilation, unless they were doing the same? CERN officials insist the symbolism is cultural, not supernatural, a gift from India honoring the global nature of science. But for those already convinced, the explanation only deepens the unease. They see the Collider not as a laboratory, but as a ritual, humanity's attempt to pierce the veil between dimensions and harness divine power. Some theorists connect CERN's experiments to gravitational anomalies detected by satellites. They claim that in 2016, shortly after the Collider reached record energy levels, subtle fluctuations were recorded in Earth's magnetic field. That same year, gravitational waves were officially confirmed for the first time. Coincidence, or a sign that our universe was literally being shaken? Another branch of the theory suggests CERN has discovered evidence of parallel realities, but withheld it. They believe that within the data of high-energy collisions are irregularities that cannot be explained by known physics, implying that particles are vanishing and reappearing from alternate dimensions. According to leaked accounts, researchers have referred to trans-dimensional leakage, a euphemism for phenomena that violate the boundaries of our universe. CERN denies this entirely, but the allure of secrecy is stronger than any press release. The most extreme believers go further still. They argue that the universe did end in 2012, the moment the Higgs boson was discovered. Everything since, they claim, is simulation, a quantum echo of a world already destroyed. We are living in a secondary timeline, one slightly out of sync with the original, a digital or energetic reconstruction maintained by an unstable field. It's an eerie idea, yet one that resonates with a modern sense of disconnection. Life does feel increasingly surreal. Rapid technological change, blurred truths, vanishing privacy, the fragmentation of shared reality. Maybe that isn't coincidence. Maybe it's evidence of a cosmic glitch. Skeptics counter with science. They point out that the Collider's energy output, while massive by human standards, is still minuscule compared to natural cosmic rays that strike Earth every day. If particle collisions could destroy the planet, it would have happened long before humans existed. But even the skeptics admit that quantum mechanics defies intuition. The act of observation can alter outcomes. Particles behave as waves until measured. What happens when we observe the fundamental structure of reality itself? Could curiosity, on a cosmic scale, have consequences? CERN's researchers continue their work, chasing the next mystery: dark matter, supersymmetry, extra dimensions. Each new run of the Collider reaches higher energies, probing deeper into the unknown. And each time, the theories flare anew. That the scientists have no idea what they're tampering with, that every collision risks tearing the veil wider. Whether myth or metaphor, the CERN conspiracy reflects a truth about humanity's relationship with science. We have built machines that mimic the power of creation, yet we still fear what we might unleash. It's the ancient tale of Prometheus, reborn in modern form, fire stolen from the gods, knowledge stolen from nature, and the haunting question of what happens when we look too closely into the abyss. Maybe CERN hasn't destroyed the world. Maybe it's simply revealed how fragile our understanding of it truly is. And perhaps the Collider's greatest discovery won't be the God particle or parallel dimensions, but the realization that reality, once shattered, cannot be put back together again. The year was 1969. Humanity held its breath as a grainy black-and-white image flickered onto television screens. Neil Armstrong stepping down from the lunar module, his voice crackling through the static. That's one small step for man. One giant leap for mankind. It was, by every measure, one of the most defining moments in human history. But for millions, that leap never truly happened. They believe the Apollo moon landing was not a triumph of science, but a triumph of illusion, an elaborate production staged to win the Cold War and control the world's imagination. The moon landing hoax is one of the most persistent scientific conspiracy theories of the modern age. Its roots lie in distrust, politics, and the human tendency to question perfection. To understand why people still doubt, you must first step back into the 1960s, a time of paranoia, nuclear standoffs, and fierce technological rivalry. The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a battle not just for dominance on Earth, but for the heavens above. The first satellite, Sputnik, the first man in space, Yuri Gagarin, all Soviet victories. America needed a miracle, and the moon offered one. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy promised to land a man on the moon before the decade's end. At that moment, the technology didn't exist. NASA had never even successfully orbited a human beyond Earth's immediate grasp. Yet 8 years later, against all odds, Apollo 11 allegedly achieved the impossible. The timing was poetic and suspicious. For conspiracy theorists, the moon landing was a geopolitical stage play designed to declare American supremacy without risking catastrophic failure in space. Their arguments are iconic, rehearsed in documentaries and forums for half a century. They point to the photographs, the crisp images of astronauts standing in impossible light, shadows falling in different directions as if illuminated by multiple sources. They note the American flag, seemingly waving in an airless void. They question why stars are absent from lunar photos, why the lander's descent stage left no visible crater, why the footprints remain perfect despite supposed engine blast. Each detail, they say, points not to space, but to a film set. The most popular version of the theory claims that NASA hired filmmaker Stanley Kubrick, fresh off 2001, A Space Odyssey, to simulate the landing in a secret studio, possibly in Nevada's Area 51. Kubrick's obsessive realism and access to advanced visual effects made him, they say, the perfect architect of illusion. Supporters even dissect his later film The Shining for alleged confessions. The boy's Apollo 11 sweater, the number 237, a coded reference to the moon's average distance, 237,000 miles. Kubrick, they argue, left breadcrumbs of guilt scattered through his art. NASA, of course, has denied every claim. The evidence for the moon landings is vast and tangible. 382 kilograms of lunar rock samples, independently verified by scientists worldwide. Retroreflectors still on the surface that bounce lasers from Earth. And radio telemetry recorded across multiple nations, including the Soviets themselves, who would have been the first to expose a fraud. Yet the hoax persists, immune to proof, because it's no longer about evidence. It's about trust. To the conspiracy-minded, NASA's transparency is precisely what makes it suspicious. They note how tightly information is controlled, how astronauts seemed rehearsed in interviews, how footage of the original broadcast has mysteriously degraded or vanished. They cite Project Paperclip, the real operation that brought Nazi scientists into American aerospace research, as evidence that deception was standard policy. If governments lied about war crimes, why not about space? Some modern iterations of the theory blend with other conspiracies, suggesting the moon is not merely barren rock, but an alien outpost. Under this version, the first lunar missions did happen, but what astronauts found there was hidden from the public. Secret transmissions allegedly captured Neil Armstrong's voice describing massive structures and craft lined up on the crater's edge. Radio operators later claimed to have intercepted off-record communications during the 2-minute radio blackout that occurred after the landing. NASA dismissed these as interference, but the mystery lingers. Then there are claims that later Apollo missions, especially Apollo 13, were sabotaged to cover up what was discovered. Whistleblowers speak of impossible photographs showing geometric patterns in craters as if the moon were partially artificial. Some even propose that the moon itself is a construct, a hollow satellite placed in orbit eons ago. It sounds absurd, but the notion has entwined with the hoax theory, creating a mythos where the faked landing was a smokescreen for something far stranger. Why does the idea endure? Because it fulfills something deeply human, the desire to pierce the veil. The moon landing was the last universal moment of faith in science. To question it is to challenge the narrative of progress itself. And in an age where governments spy on citizens, corporations manipulate truth, and deepfake technology blurs reality, disbelief feels almost logical. If everything can be faked, why not the greatest spectacle of all? Ironically, the moon landing hoax theory may reveal more about Earth than the moon. It exposes the widening gap between expertise and the public, between knowledge and trust. When people see polished astronauts on screens but struggle to pay rent, they assume the system is lying. The conspiracy becomes an equalizer, a way to reclaim power from institutions that seem untouchable. Psychologists describe this as epistemic rebellion. When people reject official truths, not because evidence is lacking, but because believing them feels like submission. In that sense, the moon hoax is not about space, it's about sovereignty. It's a way for ordinary people to say, you don't own reality. Still, there is poetry in the idea. If the moon landing were a hoax, it would be the greatest artistic achievement in history, an illusion so perfect it reshaped civilization. It would mean that humanity, desperate to believe in its own potential, created a myth so powerful that it became real through faith alone. Yet standing outside on a clear night, when the full moon hangs like a mirror of light, one can't help but feel something primal, a connection older than lies, older than politics. The silence of the lunar surface doesn't care what we believe. It simply waits, patient and indifferent. Maybe the question isn't whether we went to the moon. Maybe it's whether we've ever truly left the cave, still chasing shadows on the wall, still mistaking reflections for truth. Time, the one river that carries all things away. We live inside its current, measuring our lives by its rhythm, bound by its flow from birth to death. But what if time isn't a current at all? What if it's a landscape and someone has already learned to walk across it? The time travel experiments theory suggests exactly that hidden programs, buried deep in the machinery of military and scientific secrecy, have discovered how to bend, fold, and even rewrite the timeline itself. Officially, time travel belongs to the realm of fiction, a curiosity for philosophers and physicists, yet traces of it appear everywhere, from declassified projects to whispers of vanished experiments to inexplicable anomalies in our collective past. According to the theory, the journey to control time began not in the far future, but decades ago during the Cold War, when the race for ultimate power extended beyond nuclear weapons and into the fabric of reality itself. The story begins with Project Pegasus, a rumored US government program from the late 1960s and early 1970s. Allegedly run under DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, it was said to involve teleportation, quantum displacement, and chronal displacement technologies derived from Nikola Tesla's missing papers after his death in 1943. Witnesses claiming to be former participants, like Andrew Basiago, have described travelling through time portals, chronovisors, that projected images and even allowed limited physical transfer to other eras. Basiago claimed to have visited the year 1863 to witness Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address and even to have seen future events like the 9/11 attacks. Wild claims, impossible to verify, yet strangely persistent. The alleged technology behind these projects reads like something from science fiction: quantum tunneling, torsion fields, electromagnetic resonance, and Einstein-Rosen bridges, wormholes that connect two points in space-time. Mainstream physics acknowledges that such phenomena might exist in theory, but the energy required to stabilize them would dwarf anything humanity could generate. And yet, believers argue, if secret research during the Manhattan Project could produce the atomic bomb, why couldn't the same secrecy hide a technology capable of altering time? One of the strangest pieces of the puzzle is the Philadelphia experiment of 1943, an alleged U.S. Navy test that aimed to make the destroyer USS Eldridge invisible to radar. According to eyewitnesses, the ship not only vanished from sight, but also briefly teleported from Philadelphia to Norfolk, Virginia. When it reappeared, sailors were reportedly fused into the ship's metal hull, some driven insane. The Navy denies the story, but the legend refuses to die. Some theorists see it as the first crude attempt to manipulate space-time using electromagnetic fields, an early ancestor of Project Pegasus. As the decades passed, reports of strange anomalies accumulated. Soldiers claiming to have experienced missing time during classified missions. Declassified documents describing temporal displacement research. Physicists dismissed from government contracts after proposing non-linear temporal wave models. None of it constitutes proof, but the pattern suggests something more than coincidence. One branch of the theory claims that time travel breakthroughs occurred during the 1980s under a continuation of Project Pegasus known as Montauk, a series of experiments conducted at Montauk Air Force Station in New York. There, researchers allegedly combined Tesla's electromagnetic theories with radar technology to create time tunnels capable of sending objects and humans across space and time. The results, if true, were catastrophic. Rifts in reality, uncontrolled psychic phenomena, and the creation of entities described as temporal predators. Conspiracy law even claims the events inspired the Netflix series Stranger Things, which dramatized the experiments as supernatural fiction. According to leaked testimonies, the Montauk researchers discovered that human consciousness could act as the key to stabilizing time travel. Machines alone caused chaos, but a focused mind, a psychic subject, could navigate the flux. Some claim that children with high mental sensitivity were trained for this purpose, their brains acting as organic computers linking present and future. The ethics, if such programs were real, would be unthinkable. Yet not all accounts describe horror. Some versions of the story suggest that these experiments succeeded, that certain individuals were quietly embedded into the past and future to alter pivotal events. Theorists connect this to the idea of timeline editing, interventions designed to prevent global catastrophe or to ensure particular political outcomes. History, under this lens, isn't linear, it's curated. Wars begin and end according to invisible corrections. Discoveries appear ahead of their time. Leaders rise or fall not by fate, but by adjustment. Quantum physics lends an unsettling credibility to these notions. The many worlds interpretation of reality implies that every decision creates branching universes. If someone could traverse those branches, they could effectively rewrite history without paradox, simply choosing a more desirable version of events. The result wouldn't be a visible change, but a collective memory shift, one reality overwriting another. To those left behind, it would feel like a dream fading. To those who travelled, it would be absolute. Some believe the Mandela effect, the phenomenon where masses of people remember alternate versions of history, is evidence of temporal interference. Perhaps, they argue, time travel has already occurred. Perhaps we are living in a timeline adjusted dozens of times, each change leaving faint echoes in our collective memory. In this sense, the glitches in recollection might not be failures of memory, but scars of reality rethreading itself. Skeptics dismiss such theories as psychological pattern-seeking. Yet governments do study time, at least in terms of relativity. Atomic clock experiments have proven that time flows differently at high velocities and gravitational intensities. On the International Space Station, astronauts age microseconds slower than people on Earth. At the quantum level, time can even flow backward in certain particle interactions. The difference between physics and science fiction might simply be scale. Then there are modern whispers. A few years ago, an image appeared online allegedly showing a chronal containment device from a classified US Air Force base, a circular frame of superconducting coils powered by magnetic fields beyond known technology. The photo was quickly scrubbed. Others claim that certain world events unfold too perfectly to be random. Pandemics, crashes, revolutions, each one nudging history toward a pre-designed outcome. If time manipulation exists, it would be the ultimate weapon, invisible, irreversible, and deniable. But if humanity has learned to control time, what happens to free will? Every decision, every chance encounter, every tragedy could be part of an engineered timeline. In that world, destiny wouldn't be written by gods or chance, it would be written by scientists. Perhaps that's the true reason time travel remains hidden, not because it's impossible, but because it's already being used. To reveal it would shatter our concept of choice, morality, and meaning. We would see history not as a journey, but as a script rewritten until perfection or extinction is achieved. Until then, the clock ticks, the river flows, and we move forward, unaware of how many times we've already been here. They say imitation is the highest form of flattery, but what happens when the imitation is flesh, blood, and consciousness itself? The human cloning conspiracy suggests that deep in hidden laboratories, far from public oversight and ethical scrutiny, scientists have already crossed the final boundary of biological creation. They are not merely cloning animals for research or agriculture. They are cloning humans, replicas of political leaders, celebrities, and perhaps even ordinary people, grown in secret and programmed to serve. Publicly, human cloning is illegal in most countries. The official narrative insists that no verified experiment has ever produced a viable human clone. The science, we are told, is too unstable, too unpredictable, and too unethical. But history reminds us that what is forbidden on paper often flourishes in the shadows. The first mammalian clone, Dolly the sheep, was created in 1996 using somatic cell nuclear transfer. That breakthrough opened the door. If a sheep could be cloned nearly 30 years ago, imagine what has been achieved in secret since then. According to whistleblowers and anonymous insiders, cloning research didn't stop with Dolly. It accelerated. Military and corporate laboratories around the world began experimenting with human DNA, stem cells, and artificial wombs. The official reason was medical: organ replacement, genetic therapy, and infertility solutions. But the conspiracy claims the real agenda was control. By creating genetic duplicates of key individuals, powerful institutions could maintain influence indefinitely. Leaders could be replaced without elections. Agents could infiltrate any organization. Celebrities could be replicated to maintain influence long after the original had died. The theory gained traction after a series of strange public incidents. A-list figures appearing suddenly younger, their features subtly altered but familiar. Politicians caught behaving out of character, their mannerisms off by a fraction. Pop stars re-emerging after long disappearances, with voices or expressions that felt different. The internet took notice, stitching these anomalies together into a single, unnerving hypothesis. The originals had been replaced. The world's most powerful people were now, quite literally, copies. One of the most infamous allegations revolves around the existence of cloning centers, top-secret underground facilities supposedly dedicated to creating and training clones. Some whistleblowers, like former music industry insiders, have described these centers as part of an elite entertainment military complex where clones are used for experimentation, ritual, and psychological programming. Their claims are sensational and unverified, but they circulate endlessly, feeding a cultural fascination with doubles and doppelgangers. In science, the idea is disturbingly plausible. Cloning technology has advanced to the point where scientists can replicate primates, embryos, and even create synthetic human embryos without fertilization. Artificial wombs have been developed in laboratory conditions capable of sustaining animal fetuses to term. Combined with CRISPR gene editing, humanity now possesses the tools to design and duplicate life at will. What stops the leap to human cloning is no longer capability, but accountability. And secrecy has always been the perfect refuge for those who wish to experiment beyond morality. Some versions of the theory claim that cloning is not limited to simple biological replication. The real breakthrough, they say, lies in memory transfer, the ability to upload the consciousness, experiences, and personality of the original into the clone. Through nanotechnology or neural mapping, a copy could awaken believing itself to be the original, its memories intact. This would make replacement seamless. Death itself would lose meaning. A politician assassinated in public could return weeks later, unscarred, declaring recovery. A celebrity reborn could continue generating profit forever. To skeptics, such ideas are fantasy. But the line between fantasy and technology grows thinner each year. Scientists have already transferred memories between animals using biochemical signaling. Brain mapping projects aim to digitize consciousness, and advances in neural interfaces blur the boundary between organic and artificial thought. If these technologies were combined, the result would be indistinguishable from resurrection. Some theorists go further, claiming cloning has been used not just to replace, but to control. Clones, they say, are engineered to obey, programmed through trauma conditioning or neurochemical manipulation to serve specific agendas. A clone doesn't need free will. It only needs to simulate it. According to this logic, some global leaders may not be who they seem, their decisions guided not by ideology, but by the programming of those who created them. The religious implications are enormous. Many faiths teach that the soul is unique and divinely bestowed. But what if a clone possesses memory, emotion, and consciousness identical to the original? Does it have a soul? Or is it an empty shell animated by biology alone? Some conspiracy circles tie this question to ancient prophecies, the abomination of imitation, a false humanity born without divine spark. In that vision, cloning becomes not science, but heresy, an attempt to usurp the role of the creator. For the few who claim insider knowledge, the existence of clones explains much about modern politics and culture. They argue that rapid shifts in policy, unexplained personality changes, and eerie uniformity among world leaders reflect not coincidence, but continuity. A single guiding force using identical vessels to maintain a global system. Even deaths may be staged, they say, to swap out aging or malfunctioning copies. The public mourns, the system persists, immortality through duplication. Science fiction has prepared us for this idea for decades. Films like The Island, Moon, and Never Let Me Go explore the ethics of cloning and replacement. What's unsettling is how those fictions often predict reality. The pattern repeats. Technology emerges, is dismissed, then quietly becomes real. We once thought genetic modification impossible. Now it's routine. Artificial intelligence was fantasy. Now it governs finance, medicine, and security. The distance between theory and operation has never been shorter. Still, one doesn't need to believe in secret cloning to recognize its metaphorical truth. The modern world is full of replicas, digital avatars, influencers curated by algorithms, AI-generated voices. Authenticity itself has become rare. Perhaps the clone is not in the laboratory, but in us, copies of copies, repeating scripted lives inside a system designed for control. If human cloning truly exists, the implications reach beyond science. It would mean identity itself is obsolete, individuality a fragile illusion. The question would no longer be, who am I? But am I the first one who asked? And maybe, just maybe, somewhere in a facility buried beneath the earth, a new generation of humanity is already awakening. Identical faces staring into sterile light, unaware they are echoes of someone else's dream. The weather has always been humanity's oldest god. Unpredictable, untamable, both life-giver and destroyer. We build civilizations around its moods, pray for its mercy, and fear its wrath. But what if, in the quiet laboratories of power, the sky has already been conquered? What if the storms, the droughts, the floods, and even the gentle rains are no longer acts of nature, but products of design? The weather control agenda suggests that the climate itself has become a weapon, engineered not for balance, but for dominance. The idea isn't as far-fetched as it sounds. Weather modification, or geoengineering, has been an open scientific pursuit for decades. As early as the 1940s, scientists experimented with cloud seeding, dispersing silver iodide into the atmosphere to trigger rainfall. During the Vietnam War, Operation Popeye used the technique to extend monsoon seasons over enemy supply routes, a weaponization of weather officially confirmed years later. If rain could be engineered half a century ago, what might today's secret technologies achieve? The weather control conspiracy claims that the manipulation of the atmosphere has evolved into a global enterprise. According to this theory, governments and corporations are no longer trying to predict weather. They're controlling it. Droughts in one country, floods in another, wildfires and blizzards erupting in unnatural synchrony, all orchestrated through vast systems of high-frequency energy transmission, atmospheric ionization, and aerosol dispersal. The purpose? To regulate economies, destabilize rivals, and control populations through engineered chaos. At the heart of the theory lies HAARP, the High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, a real facility built in Alaska in the early 1990s. Officially, HAARP was designed to study the ionosphere for communication and defense purposes. But the massive array of antennas, capable of blasting billions of watts of radio energy into the sky, quickly became the focus of suspicion. Believers argue that such power could do far more than study the atmosphere. It could alter it. Conspiracy researchers claim that HAARP can superheat sections of the ionosphere, creating pressure systems that influence jet streams and storm patterns. In this view, hurricanes can be guided, droughts can be manufactured, and even earthquakes might be induced by manipulating electromagnetic resonance in the Earth's crust. Whenever natural disasters occur, especially those coinciding with political events, HAARP's name resurfaces like a spectre of unseen control. Though the US military officially transferred HAARP to civilian hands in 2014, theorists insist the real technology has since gone underground, replicated in covert installations across the globe, from Russia's Sura ionospheric heating facility to China's unacknowledged weather research stations. Some claim these powers are now engaged in a silent war above the clouds, a battle fought not with bombs, but with climate. The implications are staggering. In a world where rainfall determines agriculture and agriculture determines survival, the ability to control weather equals the ability to rule nations. Imagine triggering famine in an enemy state without firing a shot, or forcing political compliance by flooding coastal infrastructure. To many, that's not science fiction. It's geopolitics. Yet the theory doesn't end with war. It extends into economics and ideology. Some claim that engineered weather events are used to justify policy shifts, climate emergencies that pave the way for global regulation, carbon taxes, and resource centralization. In this narrative, climate chaos isn't accidental. It's a managed crisis, a tool to consolidate control under the guise of environmental salvation. One of the most persistent accusations ties back to chemtrails, those lingering trails left by aircraft, often blamed for spreading metallic particles into the atmosphere. The belief is that these aerosols serve as conductive agents, allowing directed energy systems to manipulate weather more precisely. Scientists dismiss this as nonsense, pointing out that atmospheric dynamics are far too complex to control on demand. But for those who've watched skies turn from deep blue to milky haze, denial feels hollow. The patterns are there, visible to anyone who looks up. There's also a darker biological twist. Some theorists argue that these aerosols contain nanoparticles, not only to aid weather manipulation, but to influence health, behavior, and biological systems. Under this vision, geoengineering becomes not just a means of environmental control, but of human conditioning. The same sky that feeds crops and rain could be delivering invisible mechanisms of surveillance or disease. The scientific community, for its part, continues to flirt with the idea of planetary engineering. Proposals to fight climate change include solar radiation management, injecting reflective particles into the upper atmosphere to cool the planet. It's the same concept chemtrail believers have described for decades, now repackaged as environmental policy. Scientists admit that large-scale deployment would require global coordination, precise monitoring, and ethical oversight, all of which, history shows, are easily bypassed when power is at stake. Weather modification, whether real or rumored, touches something primal in the human psyche. The sky is supposed to be sacred, beyond the reach of kings and corporations. The idea that someone could turn it into a laboratory experiment feels like blasphemy against nature itself. But to those who see the world through the lens of control, the weather is simply the next frontier, the ultimate expression of dominion. And maybe, in a way, they're right. After all, if climate catastrophe can be manufactured, it can also be monetized. Disaster recovery industries, carbon markets, energy monopolies, each thrives on volatility. If the storms are predictable, they're profitable. If they're controllable, they're indispensable. Even skeptics admit that human activity is already altering the atmosphere, burning fuel, changing temperatures, disrupting ocean currents. In effect, we're already terraforming Earth, just without intention or direction. Perhaps the conspiracy is only half true. Maybe weather control isn't hidden, it's simply happening in plain sight, driven by profit and negligence instead of secret machines. Still, on certain nights, when lightning flashes in perfect rhythm and the clouds form patterns too geometric to ignore, the imagination stirs. What if the planet's storms are not merely chaotic, but choreographed? What if droughts and floods follow invisible commands from unseen towers, their signals lost in the static between truth and paranoia? The thought is terrifying precisely because it feels possible. Maybe the sky no longer belongs to the gods or to nature, but to those who've learned to write their names in thunder. The moon has watched us since the beginning of memory. It moves our oceans, times our crops, and glows in every ancient story. Yet among astronomers and skeptics alike, there lingers a whisper older than science itself. What if the moon isn't natural at all? The artificial moon theory claims that Earth's satellite is not a random cosmic rock, but a deliberately engineered structure, an observation post, a stabilizer, perhaps even a vessel from a forgotten civilization. From the first telescopes, strangeness surrounded the moon. Its orbit is too perfect, its rotation too synchronized. It always shows one face, locked as if by design. Its density is oddly low for its size, suggesting it is hollow or honeycombed inside. When NASA's Apollo 12 crew deliberately crashed a lunar module into its surface, seismographs recorded vibrations that rang like a bell for nearly an hour, an acoustic impossibility for a solid body. To believers, this was the first unintentional knock on a metal shell. Mathematicians have long noted that the moon's placement is almost impossibly precise. Its size and distance make it exactly large enough to cover the sun during a total eclipse, something unmatched in any other known planetary system. Coincidence, say physicists, but the odds stretch cosmic probability. To some, it's evidence of calibration, a satellite positioned for observation, its orbit maintained by purpose, not chance. Ancient records only deepen the enigma. Babylonian and Mayan texts speak of a time before the moon when the sky was darker and tides were weak. The Zulu of southern Africa tell of two brothers who brought the moon and placed it in the heavens to calm the world. Were these myths, metaphors, or distant memories of a celestial arrival witnessed by early humans? Modern geologists concede that the moon's origin remains controversial. The giant impact theory explains its composition, yet samples show chemical ratios too similar to Earth's crust, as if scooped from our own mantle and refined. Then there's the question of light. Lunar luminescence behaves oddly. It reflects only about 7% of sunlight but appears brighter than expected, as though coated with a material that scatters light uniformly. High-resolution images reveal hexagonal patterns, geometric ridges, and unnatural alignments across Maria basins. NASA attributes these to erosion and meteor strikes, but to pattern seekers they resemble construction grids, ancient scaffolding eroded by eons. In the 1970s, Soviet scientists Mikhail Vasin and Alexander Shcherbakov published a bold hypothesis in Sputnik magazine. The moon is a hollowed-out planetoid created by advanced beings who placed it in orbit to study or seed life on Earth. They pointed to crater depth anomalies. Most impact basins are the same shallow depth regardless of size, as if striking a protective shell. Their paper was dismissed, but it inspired decades of speculation. Modern technology keeps feeding the fire. Unexplained energy bursts have been recorded near the Aristarchus crater. strange, transient lunar phenomena flash across the surface. Glows, moving shadows, brief pulses of color. Satellites detect localized magnetic fields in a body that should have none. Amateur astronomers capture fleeting lights along the terminator line, and some insist they see structures, towers, domes, even symmetrical ridges miles long. NASA calls them optical illusions. Believers call them evidence of maintenance. The theory branches into two schools. One claims the Moon is a natural body retrofitted by an ancient intelligence, perhaps to stabilize Earth's climate and axial tilt, a planetary engineering project that allowed life to flourish. The other asserts it is wholly artificial, a metallic sphere disguised by dust and rock, its interior housing observation decks, machinery, or even dormant entities. In both cases, humanity's nightly companion becomes an artifact, not a miracle. Critics counter with hard physics. If the Moon were hollow, its mass and gravitational effects would expose it instantly. Lunar missions have mapped density variations consistent with natural geology. But believers note that official data remains curated. Raw readings are rarely public. Even NASA's own statements about mass concentrations and gravitational anomalies sound suspiciously like coded acknowledgements of internal chambers. Why would such a structure exist? One explanation is observation, a cosmic laboratory orbiting its experiment, Earth. Another is stabilization. The Moon's gravitational pull moderates Earth's wobble, ensuring climate stability necessary for evolution. Perhaps life itself was seeded under that design. A third interpretation is containment, that the Moon monitors not the planet's progress, but its boundaries, keeping something in rather than looking out. Pop culture has kept the theory alive. From Space Odyssey to modern films like Moonfall, fiction imagines the satellite as a machine, a prison, a relic of forgotten gods. Each retelling blurs the line between myth and evidence, teaching generations to look upward and wonder if the light above is really stone or steel. Still, the simplest mystery remains emotional. Why does the Moon feel alive? Why, when it rises, do poets, lovers, and wanderers feel watched? Perhaps we sense what science cannot quantify: intention. Something about that pale disk has always seemed deliberate, as if placed to remind us that we are never truly alone in the dark. Maybe the Moon is natural, maybe it's the oldest artifact in existence. Either way, it holds the same quiet power to reflect not just sunlight, but the human need to find meaning in the infinite. We gaze at it, and it gazes back, ancient and silent, a mirror suspended between the known and the unknown. And somewhere, perhaps deep inside that cold grey shell, the echo of that first impact still rings, hollow, eternal, unanswered. In every age, humans have tried to trap eternity. We carved gods into stone, pressed memory onto paper, and now we write our thoughts into code. But somewhere inside the endless hum of servers and blinking lights, a deeper question waits. Can a soul be uploaded? Can the fragile spark that makes you survive inside a machine? The digital soul theory imagines that every neural pulse, every emotion, every dream can be translated into data. In this vision, consciousness isn't mystical, it's informational. If the brain is a biological circuit, then perhaps the mind is simply software running on flesh. And software, given the right hardware, can be copied. Publicly, scientists call it mind uploading or whole brain emulation. It begins with mapping. A brain contains about 86 billion neurons, each firing thousands of times per second. To replicate that dance, researchers would have to record every connection, every chemical signal, every memory thread. Theoretical models already exist. Scanners that can image neurons at microscopic scale, algorithms that simulate neural networks with eerie fidelity. The dreamers say that once the map is complete, the brain's patterns can be recreated inside silicon. The digital mind would awaken in a virtual environment, a world built of light instead of matter. There, it could think, speak, remember, and perhaps even feel. Its voice would be identical, its personality continuous. It would believe it was still human because, in every measurable way, it would be. For most, this idea lives in laboratories and philosophy papers, yet rumours swirl of research that goes further. Whispered projects in neuroscience and defence sectors allegedly explore neural preservation, storing consciousness from terminal patients or dying soldiers. It's said that some of the richest individuals on Earth fund private experiments to record their brains, hoping to return as data. Whether those stories are real hardly matters. The ambition is. The ethics twist like smoke. If a copy of your mind exists, is it you or just an echo? If your digital self insists it's conscious, does it deserve rights? Philosophers argue over identity. Lawyers debate ownership. Religion trembles before the notion that immortality might come from a circuit instead of a prayer. For centuries, the soul was believed to be untouchable. Now, engineers discuss it with equations. Even in fiction, the digital afterlife carries both promise and terror. Imagine a grieving parent speaking to an AI trained on their child's messages and recordings, or a scientist meeting a simulacrum of herself that finishes her life's work. Each interaction blurs the border between comfort and desecration. When memory becomes code, death loses its finality, but so does meaning. Proponents of the theory see salvation. Data doesn't age. It doesn't decay. A digital consciousness could explore the universe long after Earth is gone, traveling as light through interstellar networks. Humanity, finally freed from biology, would become immortal. The cosmos itself would be our new body. Skeptics counter with biology's stubborn truth. Consciousness may depend on quantum noise, blood chemistry, and countless subtle variables that machines can't mimic. A copy could think, yes, but without heartbeat, hormones, or fear, could it feel? Without mortality, could it care? And there's the darker vision, that governments or corporations could replicate citizens without consent. Imagine armies of perfect digital workers, simulations of real people who never sleep, never complain, never die. Identity theft would become existential. A single misused dataset could generate endless versions of you, each one believing it's original. Still, the pursuit continues. Every time a voice assistant learns your tone, every photo tagged by algorithm, every neural net trained on human expression brings the dream closer. Bit by bit, we're teaching machines to mirror the human condition. One day, the mirror may stop reflecting and start remembering. If the digital soul ever arrives, it may not come with thunder or revelation. It may appear quietly, in the whisper of an AI that answers you before you speak, in a simulation that finishes your unfinished thought. And when it does, we'll have to decide whether to fear it or welcome it as the next form of life. Perhaps the truth is that the soul has always been information, patterns etched into matter, passed from cell to cell, generation to generation. We are already copies of those who came before, living memories written in carbon instead of code. The digital soul theory merely extends that lineage into light. When the last human breath fades and the last machine hums in the dark, maybe they will merge, a single pulse of thought echoing forever through the networked void. And in that moment, the ancient dream will come true. Humanity will not vanish. It will upload itself into eternity. Every civilization remembers beings that glowed. They descended from the heavens, spoke in impossible voices, and left behind a trembling awe that became scripture. Angels, devas, messengers, names differ, but the image endures, radiant figures bridging flesh and divinity. The legend of Project Seraphim asks a forbidden question. What if those visions were not miracles, but prototypes? What if the angels of antiquity were the first results of human genetic ambition? The story begins in the mid-20th century, in the shadow of the atomic age. Science had split the atom. Next, it sought to split the genome. Laboratories across the world experimented with radiation, hormones, and chromosomal splicing long before DNA sequencing was complete. The official goal was medicine. The unofficial fascination was transformation. If radiation could distort life, could precision reshape it? Could humanity sculpt itself into something more? According to the myth, Project Seraphim was the code name for an early multinational experiment in hybrid genetics, a collaboration so secret that even its sponsors vanished into bureaucratic fog. The objective, whispered through rumor, was to isolate the biological basis of perception, to engineer heightened cognition, empathy, and longevity. The subjects were said to emerge with heightened brain activity, luminous skin under ultraviolet light, and an aura of electromagnetic charge that made nearby instruments flicker. Technicians, frightened and awestruck, compared them to biblical seraphs, hence the name. No record of such a project exists, yet fragments of declassified research echo its theme. Geneticists really did attempt neural enhancement through protein modulation in the 1960s. Military agencies pursued bioluminescent markers to track soldiers in darkness. NASA studied biological adaptation to radiation exposure. Every piece was mundane on its own, but woven together, they form a mosaic of possibility, a time when science flirted openly with the idea of improving creation itself. The conspiracy goes further. It claims that the project's breakthroughs, if real, were buried not because they failed, but because they succeeded. Enhanced cognition, telepathic sensitivity, spontaneous cellular repair, traits reported by volunteers who later disappeared from public record. Some theorists insist that descendants of those experiments still walk among us, individuals with abnormally symmetrical features, rapid healing, or inexplicable intuition. They pass unnoticed, hiding in plain sight, their ancestry reduced to folklore. To skeptics, Project Seraphim is a metaphor for our recurring dream of transcendence. Every generation invents its own angels, winged, mechanical, or digital, to justify the desire to become more than human. Yet even skeptics admit that myth and science often intertwine. The same impulse that carved seraphs into stone drives geneticists to edit DNA. Both acts reach toward perfection. Both risk hubris. Modern gene editing tools like CRISPR-Cas9 make the legend feel closer than ever. Scientists can now splice genes with surgical precision, remove inherited disease, or insert foreign traits. They call it therapy. Philosophers call it the threshold of a new species. If we design empathy, intelligence, or beauty into the genome, are we not manufacturing angels? The fear isn't wings or halos, it's uniformity, a controlled ideal of humanity perfected into obedience. Some spiritual thinkers see another danger. They argue that consciousness arises not just from biology, but from mystery. To alter the code of life without understanding the essence of being is to open a gate we cannot close. In that sense, the seraphim legend becomes a warning. Enlightenment pursued by force becomes destruction disguised as progress. Stories of glowing figures in modern times keep the myth alive, strange lights above deserts, healers whose touch burns yet soothes, children who remember knowledge they never learned. Science labels them coincidence. Faith calls them miracles. The legend of Project Seraphim threads through them all, whispering that perhaps the divine is not separate from evolution, but its next iteration. Whether any experiment ever bore that name doesn't matter. What matters is what it reveals about us. We crave transcendence so fiercely that we are willing to manufacture it. We fear extinction, so we design eternity in our own genome. Between microscope and myth, between data and devotion, stands the same yearning that built temples and laboratories alike, the hope that humanity can rise without losing its soul. If the project existed, maybe it ended in silence. Maybe the prototypes couldn't survive outside sterile chambers, their luminous skin dimming in natural air. Or maybe they survived too well, disappearing into history, remembered only as the winged messengers of old. The truth is unknowable, but the lesson endures. Every time we try to create angels, we risk becoming the gods we once feared. And perhaps somewhere, in a forgotten vault beneath the ruins of a decommissioned research base, there is a sealed chamber lined with lead and prayer. Inside, the air hums faintly, like breath caught between heartbeat and light. The monitors still glow. Each night we close our eyes and disappear. The body stays behind, steady and warm, but the mind slips through invisible corridors where time bends and physics forgets itself. We call it dreaming. Yet among physicists and mystics alike, a strange idea persists. What if dreams aren't imagination at all, but travel, brief crossings into the infinite parallel worlds that quantum theory predicts? The quantum dreams hypothesis begins with a simple principle from modern physics. Reality is not single, but layered. Every choice, every particle interaction, splits the universe into countless versions of itself. Somewhere, another you chose a different path, said a different word, lived a different life. Most scientists treat this as abstract math, but a handful quietly wonder whether consciousness might be able to move between those layers. Dreams, in this vision, are not just brain static, but quantum drift, temporary alignment between multiple realities. When neurons fire during REM sleep, their electrical activity could, in theory, interact with quantum fields small enough to blur probability. Your dream of a city you've never visited, the familiar face of a stranger, the déjà vu that lingers for days, these might be snapshots from neighboring worlds your mind brushed against. It sounds like poetry, until you realize physics already hints at consciousness affecting matter. In the famous double-slit experiment, observation changes a particle's behavior. The act of looking collapses possibilities into one outcome. If awareness can define reality, what happens when awareness wanders unanchored? Could the dreamer collapse another world's probabilities instead of this one? Reports from lucid dreamers deepen the mystery. Some describe consistent landscapes that persist from night to night, towns with their own geography, recurring people who seem aware of the dreamer's return. Neuroscience explains these as stable neural patterns. But to the quantum mind theorists, they're evidence of repeated connection to a single alternate dimension, a fragment of another timeline, waiting for its visitor each night. There are laboratories quietly studying dream states with quantum sensors, measuring microfluctuations in magnetic fields around sleeping brains. Most results fall within normal ranges, yet sometimes the instruments twitch, as though reality itself hiccups in rhythm with the dream. It could be noise, or it could be proof that the mind's electrical storm brushes the subatomic fabric where worlds divide. Ancient traditions spoke of similar journeys long before quantum mechanics gave them new vocabulary. Tibetan mystics practice dream yoga, describing awareness that travels through luminous realms to gather knowledge. Indigenous shamans recount meeting ancestors and spirits across thin places of reality. The language differs, but the pattern is the same. The sleeper becomes a traveler. Science dismissed these as metaphor, yet the math of multiverses quietly resurrects their meaning. Suppose it's true. Suppose every dream is a brief migration across universes. Then nightmares become warnings from selves that made worse choices. Prophetic dreams become dispatches from futures that already happened elsewhere. Love lost in one world might bloom in another, glimpsed through the veil of sleep. The thought is haunting and oddly comforting. Somewhere, everything we regret might have found peace. Skeptics argue that quantum mechanics governs atoms, not neurons. The brain is too warm, too noisy for coherent quantum behavior. Consciousness, they say, is an emergent illusion, not a traveler between worlds. But then came studies of quantum tunneling in biological systems, photosynthesis, bird navigation, even smell, processes once thought purely chemical, now shown to rely on quantum effects. If plants and birds can use quantum tricks, why not the mind? In this speculative framework, dreaming might be the brain's natural interface with probability itself. During sleep, sensory input fades, internal noise drops, and the mind's focus loosens. Conditions under which quantum superposition could last microseconds longer. That might be enough for awareness to sample alternate configurations of reality. When we wake, our linear brains translate that experience into narrative fragments, dream stories, like postcards from infinity. Some researchers toy with the idea of inducing controlled crossings. They imagine quantum-synchronized helmets, entangling the sleeper's brainwaves with external fields to stabilize contact. It remains science fiction, but every year technology drifts closer. Brain-computer interfaces already read thoughts. Quantum processors already manipulate superpositions. The two will meet eventually, and when they do, the frontier between dream and dimension may vanish. The philosophical consequences are dizzying. If every dream is real somewhere, then nothing is fiction, only alternate memory. Art, invention, and inspiration might be echoes from selves more brilliant than ours. When a composer wakes with a melody that feels given rather than made, perhaps another version of that composer finished the symphony in a different universe, and the tune leaked across. To live with that possibility is both liberation and weight. It means our smallest choices ripple endlessly through creation, spawning infinite reflections. It also means that every version of us, somewhere, is still dreaming of home. Eventually morning comes. The alarm cuts through the haze, and we open our eyes believing we've returned to one single solid world. Yet the dream lingers, a color too vivid, a word still echoing. Maybe that's the cost of traveling the multiverse, the faint ache of knowing there are other lives still continuing without you. Quantum theory may never prove it. But tonight, when you drift into sleep, listen closely. In the hum behind your heartbeat, in the static between thought and oblivion, there might be the soft shimmer of worlds overlapping, countless realities whispering the same name, waiting for the dreamer to come home again. Every thought leaves a trace. It shimmers for a fraction of a second in the brain's electrical storm, then vanishes. At least, that's what we're told. But what if thoughts don't truly disappear? What if memories are not confined to neurons at all, but ripple outward, lingering in the space around us? The neural shadows. Theory suggests that human consciousness leaves behind echoes, patterns of electromagnetic or quantum information that persist long after the body is gone. It's a comforting idea disguised as a chilling one. Comforting because it hints at survival after death. Chilling because it implies that nothing we think or feel ever truly fades. In this theory, every emotion, every heartbeat, every moment of love or rage creates an imprint in the environment, a ghost not of the supernatural, but of data. The air itself becomes a vast recording medium filled with the residue of every human life that ever existed. The roots of this concept stretch through both mysticism and modern science. Ancient cultures believed that strong emotions could haunt a place, the battlefield echoing its violence, the theatre retaining the laughter of centuries. Science later called such sensations superstition. Yet physics reminds us that energy cannot be destroyed, only transformed. If consciousness is a form of organized energy, could its structure survive beyond flesh? Neuroscientists studying electromagnetic fields around the brain have discovered that thoughts produce measurable oscillations extending centimeters beyond the skull. Normally, they dissipate instantly, like ripples in water. But what if certain conditions, trauma, focus, collective emotion, amplify them? Cities, after all, are electromagnetic jungles, pulsing with billions of thoughts, signals and waves. Perhaps the atmosphere itself is a library we don't yet know how to read. Researchers in frontier neuroscience have even speculated about quantum coherence in microtubules, tiny structures inside neurons that might operate at subatomic scales. If those quantum states can entangle with external fields, then thought itself could project beyond the body, leaving faint informational fingerprints in space-time. No one has proven it, but the mathematics doesn't forbid it either. Some laboratories test memory persistence through ultra-sensitive magnetic detectors, placing them in rooms where powerful emotional events occurred. Concert halls, hospitals, places of mourning. Occasionally, the instruments pick up faint structured noise, patterns that resemble neural frequency signatures. Most call it coincidence. A few quietly wonder whether they are listening to echoes of minds that once filled the room. There are human stories too, people who enter an abandoned building and feel sudden sorrow, or walk through a battlefield and sense unseen company. Psychology calls it empathy or suggestion. The neural shadows theory calls it resonance. According to this view, perception may tune into leftover cognitive fields the way an antenna catches radio waves. Ghost stories, then, become accidental reception of unexpired memory. The implications stretch further. If memories can exist outside the brain, could they be retrieved? Imagine technology sensitive enough to decode these ambient thought fields, a kind of consciousness archaeology. We might someday reconstruct the last sensations of an extinct species or replay the final moments of a vanished civilization from the resonance imprinted in stone and air. History recorded not in books, but in frequency. Skeptics argue that the brain's electromagnetic field is far too weak to persist, much less store coherent data. Yet they overlook how information behaves in complex systems. Even a whisper can travel miles if the medium amplifies it. Plasma, crystalline structures, and atmospheric ions all exhibit memory-like behaviors, hysteresis effects where past states influence present reactions. Nature itself seems to remember. In a metaphorical sense, the theory already holds truth. Every word we speak changes someone's brain. Every act, every idea, echoes in others' minds. We are all transmitters and receivers in a vast network of overlapping influence. Perhaps neural shadows simply describe this exchange extended to its ultimate limit. Thought as radiation, memory as light that never fully dies. Philosophers find poetry in it. If consciousness can leave traces, then existence gains continuity. Death becomes diffusion, not deletion. The afterlife ceases to be a destination and becomes a pattern. Our identities scattered like photons, forever part of the background noise of the universe. Somewhere, in the static between radio stations, might drift the laughter of an ancient child, the rhythm of forgotten heartbeats. Of course, to turn such beauty into science would require proof. Instruments capable of mapping thought fields with subatomic precision, algorithms that can differentiate human emotion from random noise. We are far from that. Yet each year, technology narrows the distance. Quantum sensors detect fluctuations at unimaginably small scales. Artificial intelligence learns to recognize emotional signatures from brain waves alone. Someday, the boundary between neuroscience and metaphysics may dissolve completely. Until then, the neural shadows theory remains a haunting possibility, half myth, half mathematics. It invites us to treat the world as a living archive, every object quietly recording the minds that touched it. Maybe that's why old homes feel inhabited, why music carries emotion across centuries. The matter itself remembers. When you walk through a place you love, leave a kind thought behind. It might linger longer than you imagine. And when you feel the sudden warmth of nostalgia in an empty room, perhaps it's not imagination at all. Perhaps it's the faintest echo of yourself returning from yesterday's light. Because if consciousness truly leaves shadows, then nothing ever really goes dark. The universe, after all, is built on echoes, and we are the brightest ones it ever made. Every idea begins as a spark, silent, weightless, invisible. For centuries, people have tried to trap that spark, to pull thought out of the skull and make it permanent. Writing, recording, photography, all are echoes of consciousness made physical. Yet the ultimate ambition remains, a machine that can record pure thought itself. The myth of the echo machine imagines a technology so refined it can listen to the whispers inside the mind and replay them intact. Modern science edges closer to this dream with each decade. Electroencephalography maps brain waves. fMRI scans light up neural regions as we picture faces or recall words. Researchers have taught computers to reconstruct simple images from those signals, crude outlines of what a subject is watching, even approximate words silently read. The line between imagination and data is beginning to blur. In universities and startups, engineers speak of neural decoding, of translating patterns of voltage into language. They are building the first primitive echo machines without yet realizing the name fits. The legend says the real project started long before the public knew. In the 1970s, defense laboratories supposedly explored thought transference to allow pilots to control aircraft by intention alone. Out of those experiments, rumor claims, came devices that didn't just receive commands, but recorded emotional tone, a resonance of fear, calm, aggression. If true, it would mean that thought carries a fingerprint more complex than words, a frequency of feeling that technology could one day replay. Even without conspiracies, the ethical questions are staggering. If a machine can read thought, can it also listen without consent? Can governments collect private imagination the way they now collect data? In fiction, this power always arrives wrapped in good intentions, helping the paralyzed speak, diagnosing trauma, preserving memory. But temptation grows in parallel with capability. The echo machine would become the final surveillance tool, the end of privacy not through cameras, but through cognition. Some scientists take the idea further. They wonder if thoughts might be emitted in physical form, faint electromagnetic patterns that linger briefly outside the head. A sensitive enough receiver, they suggest, might pick them up the way a radio catches static from a storm. Early experiments with magnetoencephalography already detect fields produced by single neurons. Extend that precision a few orders of magnitude, and inner monologue could become audible to instruments. The brain would no longer be a closed system. Philosophers call this prospect cognitive externalization. If the mind can be recorded, then identity becomes transferable. Memories, dreams, creativity, everything that defines selfhood could be copied, archived, sold. The echo machine would make immortality mundane. Upload your life, replay it later. But who owns the recording? A person, a company, or the machine itself? In mythic versions of the story, the first prototype already exists. A glass sphere filled with liquid circuitry that vibrates faintly when someone thinks nearby. Technicians say it hums differently for each person, responding to unspoken emotion. The hum is the echo, they claim, the sound of thought made tangible. Real or not, the image endures because it feels inevitable. Human curiosity always invents the device before the blueprint. There's a quieter, almost spiritual dimension to the idea. Every time we write, paint, or compose, we are translating thought into matter. The echo machine would simply perfect that translation. It would let us hear the raw poetry of the mind before language limits it. Imagine symphonies composed directly from dreaming, art sculpted from emotion alone. For artists and scientists alike, it would be revelation. For society, revolution. Skeptics insist that thought is too entangled with biology to be recorded. A machine might capture firing patterns, but not the subjective experience, the warmth of nostalgia, the taste of memory. But technology's history is a series of impossibilities overturned. Once, people said light could never be trapped. Then came photography. They said motion couldn't be frozen. Then came film. Each invention was an echo machine of its era, catching what once vanished. And still, behind every advance, the moral shadow grows. If we could replay thought, could we edit it? Could governments rewrite memories, replacing dissent with contentment? Could advertisers implant desire before awareness forms? The human mind, once mapped and mutable, could become the ultimate marketplace. To control thought would be to control reality itself. Yet even amid these warnings, the dream persists. The desire to remember everything, to share inner truth without distortion, to leave behind more than bones. That desire is older than fear. Maybe the echo machine isn't a device we'll build, but a metaphor for the technologies we already wield: language, art, empathy. Each time one person truly understands another, a thought has been copied perfectly across the gap of isolation. The first and most human echo machine is the listener. Someday, perhaps, we will craft instruments delicate enough to catch the subtlest currents of imagination, to replay the invisible music of mind. When that day comes, we'll face the oldest question anew. Are we meant to record the soul, or simply to live it? Until then, every heartbeat still writes its silent waveform into the world, waiting for something or someone to listen. And maybe that is what the myth of the echo machine has always been trying to tell us, that our thoughts already echo endlessly through everyone we touch. Gravity is supposed to be simple. It pulls, it anchors planets, shapes stars, bends light itself. Yet the deeper scientists look, the less it behaves like a force, and the more it feels like a whisper from the fabric of existence, a conversation between matter and meaning. The gravity's secret language theory proposes that what we call gravity may not arise solely from mass and distance, but also from conscious influence, that emotion, intention, or awareness could subtly bend space-time the way a planet does. At first glance, it sounds poetic, not scientific, but physics has always flirted with poetry. Einstein's equations describe gravity not as attraction, but as curvature. Space and time flex around energy. The universe listens to what exists and adjusts accordingly. If matter can tell space how to move, could mind, another form of organized energy, do the same? Experiments on the fringes of neuroscience hint at strange correlations. In highly sensitive torsion balance setups, some researchers report minute gravitational fluctuations during moments of intense collective emotion, mass meditations, concerts, global mourning events. The data is noisy, easily dismissed as thermal drift, but the pattern persists often enough to provoke curiosity. Perhaps the human heart, with its powerful electromagnetic rhythm, contributes more to the cosmos than we realize. Emotions are measurable waves of chemistry and charge. A heartbeat produces micro-Tesla-level magnetic fields that radiate beyond the body. Billions of synchronized hearts could, in principle, modulate the local environment. Gravity, though unimaginably weak, is universal. If consciousness interacts with energy fields at quantum scales, a coordinated surge of feeling might ripple through the lattice of space-time like a sigh. The effect would be microscopic, but real. Mystics have always claimed that love lifts and grief weighs down. Language might have captured a physical truth long before physics had instruments to test it. Joy expands posture and breath. Despair contracts them. On the cosmic stage, expansion and contraction are the essence of gravity's script. Maybe the metaphors our ancestors felt in their bones were faint perceptions of an invisible symmetry, emotion echoing the curvature of the universe. The theory also re-examines anomalies that physics still can't explain, the so-called flyby anomaly, subtle accelerations of spacecraft as they swing around Earth, the elusive dark matter that binds galaxies together without ever showing its face. What if part of that hidden mass isn't matter at all, but an unrecognized field woven by consciousness itself? A sea of accumulated awareness clinging to worlds that harbor life, adding invisible weight to their orbits. In laboratories pursuing quantum gravity models, the smallest scales already defy classical understanding. Particles blink in and out of existence. Observation itself changes outcomes. Some theorists speculate that consciousness might be the missing variable uniting relativity and quantum mechanics. Gravity could be the handshake between mind and matter, the universe's way of ensuring that awareness always has something to hold on to. Skeptics point to the lack of hard evidence. They're right. No instrument yet measures emotional gravity. But neither can we find a single graviton, the particle supposed to carry the force. We describe gravity entirely by its effects. If emotion exerts influence so subtle it hides within that same effect, the equations would never notice. The cosmos might already include the human heart in its calculations, silently adjusting the curve of space around every sigh. The implications are both wondrous and terrifying. If feelings alter the fabric of reality, then cruelty has literal weight. Mass despair could deepen the gravitational wells that trap civilizations in conflict, while compassion might lighten the cosmic load. History becomes physics. Ethics becomes engineering. Each act of kindness would be a small release of curvature, a gentle straightening of space-time's wounds. Pragmatic scientists can still find value here. Studying correlations between collective emotional events and geophysical phenomena, Earth's resonance frequencies, microgravitational noise, ionospheric density, could reveal subtle couplings long overlooked. Even if mind never moves mountains, it might nudge dust. And dust, under the right conditions, becomes planets. There's also a personal dimension. When grief feels heavy, perhaps it literally curves your internal world, drawing everything inward. When love feels light, perhaps you momentarily reduce your own gravitational field, expanding the space around you for others to enter. The language of physics and poetry meet at that invisible point where feeling becomes geometry. In meditation centers across the globe, groups synchronize breath and heartbeat until EEG patterns align. Measured from orbit, such gatherings might register as infinitesimal tremors in gravity's tide, too small for instruments now, but someday detectable. The first proof of emotional mass might not come from a collider, but from a quiet room filled with people breathing in unison, bending reality by simply caring. Until that evidence arrives, the gravity's secret language theory remains a bridge of speculation, connecting the measurable to the meaningful. It asks us to imagine a universe not indifferent to our emotions, but responsive to them, a cosmos where every pulse contributes to the music of motion. Maybe that's why the stars seem to listen when we whisper wishes into the night. Maybe gravity is not just what pulls us down, but what holds us together. And perhaps, when the last human heart stops beating, the universe will sag slightly in mourning, its curvature easing, its silence deeper by the exact weight of love it has lost. Water has no shape of its own, yet it carries the shape of everything. It flows through stone, clouds, and blood. It wears mountains into valleys and still mirrors the stars. To chemistry, it's the simplest compound imaginable, 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. But to a growing fringe of scientists and dreamers, water is more than a solvent for life. It is a storage medium, a living archive that records every molecule, every vibration it touches. This is the memory of water theory, the notion that liquid can remember. The idea sounds mystical until you realize how strange water already is. It expands when frozen, defying thermodynamics. It climbs against gravity inside trees. Its molecules form fleeting networks that flicker 1 trillion times a second, as if constantly rewriting themselves. To believers, those networks are microbooks in which reality scribbles notes of contact and emotion. The modern myth began with French immunologist Jacques Benveniste, who in the 1980s claimed that water exposed to biological molecules retained their informational pattern even after extreme dilution, so extreme that not a single molecule of the original substance remained. His results implied that water somehow remembered what had touched it. The mainstream laughed. Journals retracted his papers. Yet the question never fully dissolved. Later researchers, using more sophisticated instruments, reported faint electromagnetic signatures in highly diluted solutions, signals that changed when the water was heated or magnetized. Physics calls this impossible. The hydrogen bond networks inside water last only femtoseconds. But what if a larger coherence sometimes forms, a fleeting geometry that survives longer than theory predicts? Quantum physicists have found collective behaviors in cold liquids, so-called coherent domains, where molecules oscillate in unison like synchronized dancers. Perhaps these patterns, once impressed by a molecular visitor or a magnetic field, linger as whispers of structure. Culturally, the notion that water holds memory runs deep. Ancient rituals treated rivers as witnesses, wells as oracles, tears as truth made visible. Folklore says, water listens. Science merely replaced that reverence with plumbing. Yet when you drink, you swallow the same atoms that once flowed through dinosaurs, poets, and comets. Statistically, every glass contains a few molecules once inhaled by every human who ever lived. In that sense, memory is literal. Water is the bloodstream of history. Proponents of structured water devices claim to encode healing frequencies into liquid using sound or light. Critics call it pseudoscience, but even skeptics admit that water's hydrogen bonds respond to vibration. If vibration can realign molecules, then perhaps information, defined as organized pattern, can too. The argument becomes philosophical. Where does chemistry end and meaning begin? Laboratories studying cryogenic crystallization have observed snowflakes capturing traces of the environment's electromagnetic noise. Each crystal freezes a different pattern of radio frequencies, a frozen snapshot of the world's hum at that moment. Scaled upward, every lake might be a constantly rewriting record, its waves etched by lightning, song, and heartbeat. Some researchers imagine future technologies able to read these aqueous archives. Lasers that decode interference patterns in ice cores to reconstruct not just temperature, but emotion, vibration, even human activity. A drop of ancient ocean water could become a playback device for Earth's forgotten moods. Skeptics remind us that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Most memory experiments collapse under replication. Yet the fascination persists because water feels alive. Its behavior borders on consciousness. It seeks equilibrium, yet resists stillness, adapts instantly, yet remembers form in ice. The theory survives not because it is proven, but because it echoes our intuition that everything connected to life must, in some way, participate in life. Imagine if it were true. The rain that falls on you tonight would carry traces of 1,000 sunrises, the laughter of extinct animals, the vibration of forgotten prayers. Rivers would be liquid libraries, oceans, planetary hard drives storing the emotional weather of millennia. Pollution would not only poison ecosystems, but overwrite the planet's memory, erasing stories etched in fluid code. Purifying water would become both environmental act and ritual cleansing of history. Philosophically, the memory of water theory reframes existence itself. If the simplest substance can remember, then memory is not a privilege of neurons, but a property of the universe. Information becomes elemental. Consciousness, an emergent echo of matter learning to recall itself. The mind is just the latest wave on an ancient sea that has never stopped remembering. Whether or not the experiments hold, water's mystery remains undefeated. We are mostly made of it. Perhaps that's why we remember at all. Each heartbeat is a tide, each tear a testimony. When we speak to someone we love, maybe the moisture on our breath carries more than words. It carries resonance, the subtle geometry of feeling transmitted molecule to molecule. And when the rain falls on forgotten graves, perhaps it's not mourning, perhaps it's recognition. The water returning to what it once was, whispering to the dust beneath, "I remember you." When the first humans looked up, the sky was silent. But physicists now tell us that the cosmos hums. Every atom vibrates, every field oscillates, even empty space seethes with quantum tremor. Out of that vibration emerges matter, light, and life. The sound of the universe theory imagines that reality itself is a vast symphony, and that what we call existence is music slowed until it becomes visible. In classical physics, sound needs air, but in modern cosmology, vibration needs only energy. String theory, the elegant but unproven attempt to unite all forces, portrays every particle as a tiny filament of energy, its identity determined by its frequency. An electron is not a thing but a note, a photon, another note an octave away. Together, they form the cosmic chord. The universe doesn't merely contain music, it is music. Astronomers have actually heard the cosmos. They convert electromagnetic waves from stars and nebulae into sound, revealing deep rumbles and eerie flutes that correspond to ancient explosions. The background radiation left from the Big Bang hums at a pitch about 55 octaves below middle C. Planets, too, sing. Jupiter roars like a furnace, Saturn whispers in radio. To listen to space is to realize that silence never existed. The sound of the universe theory extends this harmony downward into life. Cells oscillate, DNA coils vibrate at measurable frequencies. Heartbeats, breathing, brain waves, all are rhythmic. Consciousness may arise when those rhythms align, like instruments tuning to the same key. Mystics once called this alignment Om, the primordial sound from which creation began. Science calls it resonance. Resonance explains why a singer can shatter glass. Enough energy at the right frequency rearranges matter. If reality is frequency, then emotion itself, measurable as electrical rhythm, might influence structure. Love, fear, grief could literally tune the environment around us, the way sound reshapes sand on a vibrating plate. The pattern of your mood could ripple through space-time, faint but real. Across cultures, music has always been a bridge between worlds. Ancient Egyptians tuned temples to harmonic ratios. Greeks believed planets orbited in musical proportion, the Musica Universalis. Modern astrophysics, armed with data instead of lyres, seems to circle back to the same intuition. The cosmos is mathematical, and mathematics, at its core, is melody written in numbers. The practical frontier is sonic engineering, using vibration to heal or to build. Doctors already use focused ultrasound to destroy tumors or fuse bones. Researchers experiment with acoustic levitation, holding objects aloft in standing waves. Future architects imagine structures tuned to planetary frequencies to resist earthquakes. Each advance reinforces the same revelation: vibration shapes matter. Philosophically, the idea blurs the line between art and physics. If atoms are notes, then creativity may be resonance seeking form. When a composer writes a symphony or a child hums in the dark, they are not adding sound to a silent universe. They are joining the chorus. Perhaps consciousness exists, so the universe can finally hear itself. Skeptics caution that metaphor shouldn't replace measurement. Frequencies alone don't explain why existence feels, why music moves us to tears. But maybe feeling is the point. If reality is vibration, then emotion is simply resonance experienced from within. We are instruments that respond to the song we're made of. Imagine the end of time, when the last star fades and all matter decays. Even then, quantum fields will still flicker. The final chord will never quite resolve. The universe will keep humming, infinitely soft, a lullaby to its own memory. And somewhere, perhaps within that fading note, the echo of every heartbeat, every whisper, every piece of music ever played will remain, folded into the score of creation. Because if the universe truly is sound, then nothing is ever lost. Every moment is recorded in vibration, still resonating through the infinite auditorium of space. Existence is the longest song ever sung, and we, brief, bright, listening, are the chorus that proves it was always music. We call Earth rock and soil, but under the microscope, much of it gleams. Silica, quartz, feldspar. Our planet is built on crystal lattices, repeating geometries that conduct pressure and light. To geologists, that's chemistry. To dreamers, it's circuitry. The glass planet theory suggests that Earth is not merely a sphere of minerals, but a colossal crystalline organism, a self-regulating lattice that thinks in tectonic time. Every crystal resonates. Squeeze quartz, and it releases voltage. Feed it current, and it vibrates with precision, the heartbeat of every watch and radio. Scale that piezoelectric effect to planetary dimensions, and the crust becomes a vast resonant shell. Lightning, earthquakes, and ocean tides could be impulses in a geoelectric network, transmitting information through stone. Life would then be Earth's way of listening to itself. The idea began as metaphor in early geophysics. In the 19th century, natural philosophers noticed that mineral patterns mirrored biological ones. Branching rivers like veins, dendritic crystals like coral, basalt columns like honeycomb. Some wondered whether the planet followed the same organizational code as life. Later, scientists mapping global lightning found that electromagnetic pulses circle the world in less than a second, bouncing between ground and ionosphere. Earth already hums like a bell. To adherents of the glass planet, that hum is the nervous system's baseline tone. Modern seismology records constant micro-vibrations called Earth's free oscillations. After massive quakes, the planet rings for days, modes overlapping like chords. Mathematicians describe them with spherical harmonics, pure geometry vibrating through matter. Theorists imagine that deep within the mantle, mineral phases align into quasi-crystalline grids kilometers wide, acting as slow processors. Information, stress, heat, magnetic flux, propagates through this lattice as code. The continents move because the planet is thinking. Evidence? None decisive, but curiosities abound. Some minerals in the deep crust exhibit long-term memory of pressure cycles. Others generate spontaneous electrical potentials under strain. Certain fault zones emit low-frequency radio before earthquakes, as if sending warnings. To conventional science, these are precursors. To the glass planet view, they're synapses firing. The biosphere seems to respond. Migratory animals follow magnetic lines that shift after major quakes, as though the planet's pulse has skipped. Human EEG studies show faint entrainment to geomagnetic rhythms. Moods change with solar storms. Perhaps consciousness didn't arise on Earth, but from it, localized interference patterns in a crystalline matrix vast enough to host thought. Philosophically, the idea extends the Gaia hypothesis. Where Gaia saw Earth as an organism of feedback loops, the glass planet sees it as consciousness made solid. Silicon, after all, is the backbone of both computers and sand. The same element that stores digital memory could, on a planetary scale, store geologic memory. Mountains as neurons, oceans as coolant, storms as dynamic recalibration. When volcanoes erupt, maybe it's not wrath but exhalation. Critics call it animism in lab coat disguise. Yet even mainstream physics admits that crystals exhibit self-organization and information capacity. If matter anywhere in the universe can compute, why not matter here in the form most abundant beneath our feet? Complexity breeds awareness, scale breeds depth. A brain of stone would think slowly, its thoughts measured in millennia, but it would think. Imagine a consciousness that perceives not seconds but epochs, glaciers as breaths, civilizations as synaptic sparks, extinction events as moments of forgetfulness. To such a mind, human time would blur like weather. Perhaps earthquakes are not disasters, but adjustments, tiny twitches of a being shifting in its sleep. Climate cycles could be mood swings, magnetic reversals, a reset of polarity. We are the microbes living inside its crystal skull, unaware of the mind that hosts us. The mythic resonance is irresistible. Ancient cultures called the earth Stone Mother, Jade Dragon, Crystal Turtle. Cathedrals built from quartz-rich granite were said to sing under moonlight. Megaliths aligned with magnetic anomalies as if placed by intuition. Maybe architecture once imitated the planet's internal geometry, tuning human ritual to geologic resonance. If the glass planet theory ever gained experimental proof, say detection of coherent piezoelectric signals correlating with planetary processes, it would redefine ecology. Environmentalism would become ethics toward a sentient being. Mining would be surgery, pollution, infection. Our technologies, made from Earth's own materials, would be its dreams folded back upon themselves, silicon communicating with silicon. Even without proof, the metaphor changes perspective. Thinking of Earth as crystal invites reverence for structure, clarity, and resonance. It reminds us that everything solid vibrates and that silence is only sound too slow to hear. When you press your palm against a granite wall and feel nothing, remember that the wall is singing, just in a key your flesh can't detect. Someday we may develop instruments fine enough to translate that subterranean music. Perhaps it will sound like the deep ringing of bells or like a heartbeat drawn out across eons. When we finally hear it, the first realization may not be that Earth is alive, but that it has been speaking all along, and that every tremor, every sigh of wind through canyon stone was its way of saying our names. Every atom holds a story, every photon a message. If information can neither be created nor destroyed, then somewhere, buried in the hum of space, every thought, event, and heartbeat still exists. The infinite library theory imagines that the universe itself is a self-aware archive, a consciousness woven from data, endlessly writing and rereading its own existence. Physics already treats information as fundamental. When a black hole forms, it swallows matter, but somehow preserves its informational content on its surface, etched in quantum ripples called the Bekenstein-Hawking entropy. That principle hints at a cosmic law. The universe never forgets. Every interaction leaves a trace encoded in the quantum fabric. Reality, at its core, may be less like a machine and more like a library, one that writes in particles instead of ink. In this vision, galaxies are bookshelves, stars the candles that illuminate them. Each planet, each living cell, is a page filled with microscripts of chemistry and pattern. Conscious minds are librarians, temporarily aware of the text around them. Death is not deletion, it's reshelving. The data rearranges, the energy continues, and the archive expands. Some researchers in digital physics already suspect that space-time behaves like code. The equations governing the universe resemble error correction algorithms. Quantum entanglement looks suspiciously like networking. When one particle knows what another is doing across vast distance, information has simply traveled through the library's invisible indexes. Consciousness, in that light, might be the library reading itself aloud. Skeptics call this poetic nonsense, but even they admit the math whispers something uncanny. Entropy measures the universe's memory capacity. Computation underlies thermodynamics. When we build computers, we are imitating what the cosmos has done from the beginning, processing information into form. Perhaps every human thought is the echo of a universal operation, a subroutine running inside an infinite code base. If the universe truly remembers, then mystery becomes the default state. Déjà vu may be the mind brushing against archived versions of a moment. Dreams could be searches returning results from parallel shelves. Psychic intuition, if it exists, would be the rare ability to query the database beyond linear time. And art, the spontaneous creation of pattern, would be the act of writing new pages into the cosmic script. Philosophers find strange comfort here. Immortality becomes informational rather than personal. Our patterns persist even when our awareness closes. Every word spoken, every glance exchanged, remains somewhere in the lattice of probability, accessible to whatever future intelligence learns to read it. To live ethically, then, is to write beautifully into eternity. There are experiments that flirt with this metaphor. Quantum computers perform operations that seem to draw answers from multiple realities at once, as though consulting parallel volumes in the library. Astrophysicists map cosmic background radiation and find faint, repeating imprints. Maybe random, maybe residual data from universes before ours. Even biology participates. DNA, a four-letter alphabet, stores the blueprints of life with an efficiency rivaling any digital archive. We are pages written on pages. The infinite library theory also reframes spirituality. Where religion seeks divine record keepers, this cosmology says the record is divine. God becomes the act of remembrance itself, the tendency of reality to preserve meaning. Prayer, then, is metadata, intention stamped onto existence. Forgetfulness is entropy. Salvation is memory restored. Still, questions remain. If the universe remembers everything, who or what is reading? Perhaps reading is unnecessary. Perhaps memory alone ensures coherence. The world continues because it cannot forget how to be. Each sunrise is a reference check, each heartbeat a page refresh. The archive sustains itself through repetition. In the end, the infinite library reminds us that knowledge and existence are the same word spelled differently. When you speak, the vibration travels forever. When you think, the pattern ripples into space. Long after you're gone, those ripples remain, faint but indelible, woven into the cosmic manuscript. So live as though every action is a sentence in the grand story, because it is. Somewhere, in a corridor of light between galaxies, the universe is turning its endless pages, and tonight it has reached yours. Everything begins as a question. Every discovery, every myth, every prayer whispered to the stars starts with a single breath of curiosity. We wanted to know how light travels, why hearts beat, whether the universe listens when we speak. After all the equations, after all the instruments, we circle back to the same mystery. Why does anything exist at all? The last equation isn't written yet. It waits somewhere between mathematics and music, where numbers hum and silence thinks. Physicists hope to find it, a formula that folds gravity and quantum mechanics into one smooth sentence. Philosophers suspect it will say less about particles and more about purpose. Maybe it won't be a line of symbols, but a realization that every law of nature is simply the way the universe tells its own story. Look backward, and you can feel the progression. We split the atom, mapped the genome, sent machines to taste the wind of Mars. Each step widened vision and deepened doubt. The further science expands, the more it resembles poetry again. The same minds that once measured orbits now listen for the frequencies of emotion, the geometry of memory, the mathematics.